7:30, so I'm going to get it going.
All right, sounds good.
Ladies and gentlemen, wrestling has more than one royal family. I am my kingdom! I am my kingdom!
So sometimes life just keeps throwing hit after hit at you, and you have to roll with those punches. Tonight is one of those nights. As you guys know, last Monday we had trouble going because of technical issues on my end. Tonight we have trouble going because of technical issues on Jeff's body's end, as his voice is not doing so well, and he works in sales and I work in special services, and we both make our living talking to people, unfortunately, because we both hate people. But
Right.
we don't hate you, our lovely listeners, so we're going to try to cover as much as we can tonight. You know, maybe go at an hour at the maximum. I'm thinking probably more like half an hour. And then we have loaded up for you the very first Wrecked with Wrestlers episode that we did. That's normally behind our paywall on Patreon, where we talk about the career of Chris Benoit and the match.
I think we just lost you. As he was saying.
So we would, and we talk about the 4 matches each of us would bring if we were stranded on a deserted island. So we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. And welcome to Kingdom of Honor. I am your usual host, Zanman Shane Sabuni, along with my good buddy, the slightly ailing Jeff.
Slightly ailing's an understatement.
Well, you're better than you were 2 days ago.
I'm better than I was this morning. This morning I couldn't even talk.
Well, there you go.
Lots of honey and tea.
And you might say, well, you know, why isn't he going to be professional and push through it? And the reason is because he needs his voice for his job, and in 2 days, we are going live right after AEW with Dynamite After Dark, and he needs to have his voice ready for that because that's going to be an exciting time to go live right after a live wrestling program.
And let's put it this way, at least I showed up for as long as I can go.
That is correct.
And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to give a bonus, you know, behind our paywall, like Shane said. It's our top tier on patreon.com/Kingdom of Honor. You know, go there, donate to us, help us keep the show alive, because it does cost us money to run this. It's nice to have the fans appreciate us. And we're going to show you one of our exclusive. It's the top tier, $10 tier. We'll never go higher than that. For $10, you can get everything that we do, and there's a lot of content, as Shane found out today. But this was our very first one, probably the one we're the most proud of. It's our Wrecked with Wrestlers with Chris Benoit, as Shane had said earlier.
There are 436 creator posts on Patreon right now on our site. That includes
I've been
articles
busy.
Jeff's written over the years. It includes our first show we did a few years ago called Excuse the Aggravation. It includes the stuff that we've done on LOP Radio. It includes the exclusive stuff that we've done for Patreon. So there's lots of content out there. I was surprised to see there was stuff about football and hockey out there. That was never cleared with me, but you know it's fine. So
I said every single article I've ever written. There's stuff about music on there too.
Yeah, there's even a review of the Human Centipede. So you want to know what Jeff thought about the Human Centipede? There you go.
Hey, I uploaded them all. Every article I've ever written's up there. Figured I'd give some exclusivity to it.
I had forgotten that we even did this, but in going through there was an episode called "Excuse the Aggravation Awakens," and that's where for the full half hour of the show we did The Force Awakens because I liked it and Jeff thought it was a rehash of A New Hope. So
Well, I mean, I liked it. It was my favorite movie of the year, but it was a disappointment because it wasn't the greatness that I was expecting. I should have known when George Lucas didn't write it that it wasn't going to be up to par, but you can go on there and it's a half-hour episode. You can listen to it and you'll enjoy it. And I want to give a quick shout out to Kathy at Kathy Cathe at Twitter. Follow her. She's really, really into wrestling, and she gave us a shout out today, Shane and I, and along with other LOP radios like Imp and Doc, for the content that we put out, and it's very much appreciated. I'm glad she did it, and just want to give her a shout out and see if we can get her a few more followers.
there you go. Jeff, I mentioned to you earlier today that there was 3 big things that happened over the weekend, but there was a 4th one that I forgot about that I'm not sure if you saw or if it slipped under your radar.
Dude, there's a 5th one that I don't think you've even heard about.
Well, probably, but the first one I wanted to bring up because it kind of relates to something somebody was saying to me yesterday, is that there's a British promotion. I can't think of the name of it, but they were purchased by RPW. And they were running their last show on, I believe, October 19th. I could have the date wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the date. And they had agreed with WWE for WWE to send some of their contracted wrestlers that used to wrestle for them onto their final show.
It wasn't even, I'm sorry to jump in, but it wasn't even contracted wrestlers that used to. It's contracted wrestlers that still do.
Okay.
They weren't signed to the organization, but because of the amount of popularity they had with the organization, knowing that it was going to fold, the WWE was letting them continue to wrestle for the promotion, and then last minute said, "You're under contract with us. We're pulling you."
There you go.
Which was a low ball horseshit thing to do.
Right. And this is something that came to my attention because of our other super fan Ryan Evans who mentioned us in the tweets regarding it. AEW stepped up, and Cody said, we'll send you MJF, we'll send you Sean Spears. There's a female wrestler, I can't think of who they're sending. I think they're also sending Kip Sabian. And then the coup de grace, he posted, and one more thing, Brandy and I will be there too.
Nice.
So there it is, AEW stepping up and sending their 2 of their high profile people, 3 of their high profile people plus Sean Spears, Kip Sabian, and I can't remember the woman's name, that they're sending over there, replacing WWE people that don't even have names. So
right.
And this relates to me posting. And there's something that Brandy saw, that there was a dude with cancer that's an adult, and they didn't know how to do like a Make-A-Wish for an adult, and his one wish before he dies is to go to an AEW show. And so she said, "Why don't you?" And this is to his wife. She said, "Why don't both of you be my guests at Full Gear?" So my whole thing is, these are good people doing good things. And so while I have said, and Jeff endorses this, don't fight over wrestling companies, let wrestling companies fight over you. And I fully acknowledge that AEW could burn me at some point. I really do believe in these people and what they're doing. And I understand the cynical nature of people, but I think these people really do want to change the wrestling world.
Well, and I'm not even at the don't let wrestling don't even let wrestling companies fight over you. Just watch what you like to watch. Plain and simple. I like to watch everything, and I do watch everything. And even the WWE, where Shane a lot of times acts like it doesn't exist anymore, I still find some enjoyment in watching some WWE wrestlers. I can't sit down and watch Raw. I can't sit down and watch a SmackDown. Too much comedy bullshit backstage, funny haha stuff for me. But when I see AJ Styles enter the ring, when I see anything going on with Kevin Owens or even Kofi in his latest run, I've got to watch it because it is damn good wrestling. And it's not just them, it's any organization. And every organization has something that will speak to you. You don't have to watch it all. Lord knows I can't, but I do pipe in and watch what I can, and I enjoy what I can. And that's the way it should be done.
Right, exactly. And you know, I understand not having time to watch them every week, but that's why I kind of like binge some stuff. You know, like I'll watch a few Impacts in a row, a few MLWs in a row. Um, I basically watched NXT in two pieces this week. Um, Although when I saw who Kushida's tag team partners were, I fucking turned it off right at that point. Um, and so I never did finish watching.
Who were they? Because I didn't watch it this week.
So it was supposed to be Imperium, you know, so the three guys that are not Walter against
Right.
Kushida and two mystery partners. It was fucking
Yeah,
Fandango.
and well, there's nothing wrong with Fandango. I can't even say the damn word. I'm that sick.
Well, no, because you're a Tyler Breeze fan, so of course you're going to think there's nothing wrong with Fandango. But I do not.
Well,
like
I'm a Fandango fan before he was even Fandango. What was his name? Curtis something?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a damn...
Fandango, I should have said that it was Breezango.
Yeah, I mean, he's a damn good wrestler, and he was a great wrestler, but he needed that gimmick to get him over in the WWE universe. Because
I
at the time...
see young, fresh talent on there, and instead I got fucking Breezango, is the point.
But who were you going to get? I mean, everybody...
I didn't know.
And this is one real complaint that I have about NXT so far, is they have pilfered everybody with a name off of that show. So right now, there's nobody, absolutely nobody for their USA, whatever they're doing. I mean, they've got the Undisputed Era. They've got, you know, Matt Riddle, who still just impresses me every time he enters the ring. You know, they've got a few names here and there, but in all reality, they don't have much. And that's because everybody has gone up to the main roster.
But isn't this the third time that there's supposed to been like a mystery opponent or a mystery partner, and it's turned out to be Tyler Breeze? You know, I mean, to me,
I don't
spread the love around a little bit. You know,
spread it all to Prince Pretty.
I don't know. I would have. I mean, it could have been Bobby Roode and what the fuck's his name?
Dolph Ziggler?
No, not fucking Dolph Ziggler.
Well, they're tag team champions right now. It had to.
Aren't they? I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I was thinking the guy that used to be in American Alpha.
Oh, Chad Gable.
Chad Gable. Yeah.
Dude, he has, you know, and I know how much you hate, you know, WWE and all they stand for and everything.
What?
But if you get a chance, you need to watch some of these matches between Gable and Baron Corbin.
Nope.
It has been the best work out of both of them that I've seen them ever do.
Nope.
And that includes the American Alpha versus Revival days.
No. I will not watch that product.
Well, I'm going to enjoy it. So
there's one yearly exception, and we both know what that is.
Yep. And we will do that again this year. It's coming up pretty soon.
It is.
And this year I'll have less of a Susan distraction, so I'll actually be able to sit down and watch it with you.
It was both Susan and your boyfriend that was living with you at the time.
Yeah, well, boyfriend. Remember, he's the one that pointed out the thing about
that ruined your wrestling fandom forever. Yes, I realize that.
What was it? The Aleister Black Tommaso Ciampa match.
Yeah.
How many times can a guy get hit in the head?
Yep.
So yeah, but he won't be here. It'll just be me and you this time. So.
Yeah. So where were we? Where were we now? How did we get on that topic?
As usual, our ADD has kicked in.
And NXT had the same problem for me this week, other than that I did last week, is in that I was really into the Dijakovic and Keith Lee match, and then they went to commercial. And then they came back to commercial and took me at least 2 minutes to get back into it. And then the main event of that first hour was the Street Fight rematch. I was really into it until they went to commercial, and then took a couple minutes for me to get into it. And they went to commercial again, and it took a couple minutes for me to get back into it. It's just it's such a disconnect watching a wrestling product and then having these, 2, 3, 4 minute long commercial segments in there.
It has honestly been my biggest complaint about WWE wrestling since 1995. They have to interrupt every decent match with a commercial. Now, WCW was guilty of it. Ring of Honor has been guilty of it at times. There's been a couple times where they've overdone it, but in all reality, they don't do it much. And WCW was guilty of it, but WCW usually only did it in matches that went longer than 20 minutes. If a match went 20, 25 minutes, then they had a commercial break in between, somewhere in the middle during a dead spot. But for the most part, they tried to stay away from those commercial breaks. But WWE has done that since the early 90s, and it's been one thing that has angered me since the debut of Raw. Why do you do that? Why? Are you trying to sell house show tickets so people will come and watch it so they can actually get the whole match? And when you've got your own damn network, why not keep the bloody cameras running and show the whole match on the network when you post it on the network?
Well, supposedly, according to Triple H, there's hard ad breaks on USA Network that they can't get around.
Fine, keep it running and post it on the damn network.
Yeah, or do a split
Seriously.
or something,
Yeah, or like you said, a split screen or anything. And we're going to have, unfortunately, we're going to have the same issue with AEW. I just hope and if they know that there's these hard ad breaks, why can't they time it better? They know that their hard ad breaks are coming. Why can't they time the matches so that they line up with the commercial breaks?
And you know what? Do we know for sure it's going to happen with AEW? Because it doesn't happen with Impact. It doesn't happen with MLW.
It's TNT, though.
Right, it's TNT, but they've also got a strong partner with Tony Khan and the AEW brand at this point. So maybe they'll be a bit more lenient.
Hopefully they allow soft breaks.
At least it won't happen as often,
Or hopefully the writers of AEW and Impact, once Impact moves to Access, are a little bit smarter and actually time this stuff out. When you're only doing a 12-minute match, how about you cut out the 3 5-minute segments you did before that 12-minute match? Do we have to have 3 backstage segments and listen to Mauro Ranallo talk for 10 minutes before we even get to the match? Cut that stuff out and just run the match.
There you go.
I mean, if it's really that big of a deal, do a couple of segments to get you to that commercial break, then come back from the commercial break with the 2 guys in the ring. So what? We missed their introductions, but at least we don't. Why? I mean, that when I've been going back, and it's something because I'm writing a book, so one of many. I've got like 4 going on right now, but one of the books I'm writing is about Nitro and the Raw and ECW and the whole Monday Night Wars. And one thing that always annoyed me about that is they would go through the introductions and we would see both wrestlers come to the ring. And then as soon as both were in the ring and they do their introductions, they cut to commercial break. And then they miss the first, 2 minutes of the match.
Right.
Why not?
And people would complain about, guys getting like dark entrances. It's like, okay, so you'd rather miss 2 minutes of the match than miss a fucking entrance?
I think more people would complain less about the dark entrances.
I agree, I'm saying people would complain about that. They would say it makes certain wrestlers look like jobbers, and it's like
because people complain about everything under the sun. So,
and here's the thing. I mean, what difference does it make if there's 2 3-minute ad breaks or 1 6-minute ad break? So do a 6-minute ad break between matches.
Exactly, I agree, and that's something that has bothered me for 25 years now. We're pushing 30 years now that has bothered me.
I think it's more pronounced for me right now because I have not been watching wrestling that has that happen for over a year.
Well, yeah, because
and it never used to happen on NXT at all.
We've been watching MLW, we've been watching NXT, we've been watching NJPW that doesn't do anything like that. we've been watching all of these other shows that have somehow figured out how to not have a commercial break in the middle of the match. And I get the reasoning behind it. I really do. It's like, okay, here's an exciting moment of the match. You want to see who wins, so stick through the commercial break. No, you know what the reality is? That's when I would turn the channel. And if I'm watching AEW and well, I mean, I'm not turning the channel from AEW. This is a landmark thing that's happening. So at least this week, it's all about AEW. But back in the Monday Night Wars, if I was going to flip the channel, it would have been the second they went to a commercial break and drew me out of a match. Because
I use it to go to go throw a load of laundry in, or to go do a load of dishes.
Right.
Start something cooking. And I'll get back and I won't come back until I hear somebody's voice on there.
Yeah, so I get where you're coming from, and I understand it too.
Yeah. So at Death Before Dishonor, there was a World Heavyweight Championship change.
Ugh.
Roosh won the ROH World title from our boy Matt Taven. Something that I think was inevitable, and you said that you were gonna riot about somehow.
I'm throwing a riot right now. I'm burning stuff as we speak.
But
I'm flipping over Matchbox cars and throwing dumpsters, little Lego dumpsters. I am rioting right now.
So directly after that, Roosh and his dad announced that they were no longer under contract with CMLL, and they were free agents in Mexico. And as a response to that, CMLL announced they were releasing Roosh's brother, Dragon Lee, who is, believe it or not, their world welterweight champion.
Who is, believe it or not, one of the most exciting junior heavyweights on the planet right now.
And one of the most popular stars on the planet right now, and most booked stars on the planet right now.
And yes, Will Ospreay, I love you to death, and I think you are my wrestler of the year. But Dragon Lee is one of the most popular super junior heavyweights on the planet right now.
And that apparently is one reason why they decided to release him, because he wrestled at Bola when they didn't want him wrestling at Bola. So, nothing yet about them releasing their half-brother Mystico, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's something going on with that pretty soon too.
Which is surprising, because he was a huge part of CMLL. To release all three of the brothers like that, that's a huge misstep by them. And I wonder if that cuts their ties with Ring of Honor too.
Well, that's the thing is does it cut their ties with Ring of Honor? Does it make Dragon Lee not able to perform for New Japan? Because of their relationship with CMLL.
Yeah, but they have a stronger relationship with Ring of Honor, don't they?
Well, I would have said they did before this summer, but we know what happened on the Global Wars tour. There was no NJPW people on there.
Which still to this point makes me wonder. Because, like you said, it really does kind of make me question things.
And now Ring of Honor will not be able to use Roosh's name, because Roosh is trademarked by CMLL.
Are you fucking kidding me?
So is Dragon Lee. So
are you fucking kidding me?
So the rumor right now is that Roosh, and actually going forward, Roosh in another event that he's booked on is just going by El Toro Blanco. Which sounds pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah, I mean.
And Dragon Lee was booked as Toro Rojo. I'm not sure what Rojo means. But
I don't know, and I'm too sick to look it up at this point.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
I'd go for it.
But yeah, I mean, so that's the thing is that due to this stupid dispute, these guys can't even use their popular names. So
and
they're going full WWE on them, basically.
What is their reason for cutting them, for releasing them?
Well,
was it
Roosh and their dad left? They just announced they were free agents in Mexico, and then as a response to that, it means red. It means he'll be the Red Bull. So Toro Rojo would be the Red Bull. So Um, so basically, their response to that, and apparently they were already unhappy with Dragon Lee for performing at Bola. Bola, they're talking about is the Battle of Los Angeles for PWG that happens every summer. Um, there was AAA people already booked for Bola, and basically LO didn't want their talent mixing with AAA talent, and so they told Dragon Lee not to compete there, and he did anyway. So, and so basically the response was that they released Rush's brother because Rush left the promotion.
Why would you? No.
Again, they released one of the most popular wrestlers in the world, their world welterweight champion, because of a dispute with his brother. Let that sink in for a second.
Okay.
That is an amazing business plan.
So let's put it this way. You have Bret Hart. And you have Owen Hart. And Bret Hart leaves the company. Owen Hart is one of the most over people in your company. Do you fire him just because Bret left?
No, what you do is you have him jump from the ceiling to his death about a year and a half later.
It was almost 2 years later. Now, I'm not saying that was a bad decision, but
it was a year and a half. It was he left in November, and it was May of '99 it happened. So it was a year
okay.
And a half.
Well, regardless. Well, no, he left in '97, dude.
Yeah, so I said a year and a half, November of '97 to May of '99.
I'm on cough medicine. I can't think.
All right, go ahead.
Don't
anyway.
make me do math. But I'm just saying, I mean, when you have Owen, who was one of the most popular stars in wrestling at the time, WWE would not let him out of his contract because of that. And of course, that was something that made everything else, made the dispute even bigger because Davey Boy, Neidhart, all those guys were free to go. But they wouldn't let Owen out. When you've got the most popular member of the family under contract with you at the time, you don't let him leave just because his older brother left.
Yeah,
it's
almost like they did him a favor, honestly.
Right. They did. Because I can guarantee that if Owen had gotten out of his contract like he wanted and wasn't forced to come back in that stupid feud with Shawn Michaels that ended up with Triple H, I think that he would have prospered big time in WCW.
Yeah, and Ring of Honor didn't. They currently have a business relationship with CMLL as well, but that did not stop them from using Dragon Lee on Death Before Dishonor or the next night at the Death Before Dishonor Fallout shows. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ring of Honor snaps him right up.
Oh, they should. He is an amazing talent. Amazing talent.
And speaking of snapping people up, reports are that WWE was trying to snap up Matt Taven, and so Ring of Honor re-signed him to twice as much as the top salary of any NXT star.
Good.
Which is just insane. And with incentives, he could reportedly earn triple the top salary on NXT. I like Matt Taven, but I hate that we're in a world where WWE is forcing organizations to overpay for talent.
I agree that is overpaying him, but I think it's a tough situation because I do love what WWE and NXT has done for certain people. Like if you look at Undisputed Era, every single one of them are better off for having left Ring of Honor and gone to NXT. But at the same time, Ring of Honor is never going to get out of this. I hate to say it, but they're now probably the fourth rated American. Well, do you count Impact as American or are they Canadian?
I count them as American.
So we've got Ring of Honor now, who is the fourth best American company, and 8 months ago they were probably the second best. they've gone so far downhill. This is a big move for them and something that I think they needed to do simply because they need to keep their top stars. And Taven is a top star.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just don't know, and I think that if Marty Skrull resigns with him, that'll be another huge move. But did you see his comments recently?
No, I didn't.
When he was asked about his contract status with Ring of Honor about resigning with them, his reply was they should have put the world title on me when they had the chance.
Yes, I agree, and that would probably be a reason to leave.
Yeah.
And I get that, and I have no issues with Marty for saying that because they really fucked up when they didn't give him the title. He should have won it. He should have won it from Lethal. It should have been Taven versus Skrull at Madison Square Garden. Plain and simple.
Yeah, it should have been. And then maybe we'd be looking at Skrull dropping the title to Taven at Final Battle this year, where Taven had even more time to get built up and to keep declaring himself as the real world's champion. They fucked up that angle with Taven. They fucked up by having them go to a time limit draw. They fucked up by even putting the title on Lethal when they did. And I think that I think time has proven me right when I said that originally, because it's been nothing but downhill since then.
Well, and I agreed with you. I thought in 2015, I thought Lethal was at the top of his game. I legitimately, because of the match he got out of Adam Cole, thought he was one of the top in the world. Because Adam Cole was not that good back then. But he got that match out of Cole. I thought that he was one of the top in the world. But his second run was so bad. Because they didn't let it play out. They didn't let his redemption storyline play out. Dalton Castle got hurt. They pushed the reset button through the title on Lethal when it should have gone to Skrull. And they just, like you said, they've been downhill ever since.
Yeah, I will never understand why at Best in the World they did not put the title on Skrull, and then the next night they put it on Lethal.
Makes no sense. Absolutely no sense.
It didn't happen on TV for like 4 or 5 weeks or something, but it was actually the next night that Lethal won the championship.
And that's another thing that's really hurt Ring of Honor. The fact that their TV is so far behind. Every other company has figured it out, but they can't for some reason.
Well, to be fair, Impact does the same thing. Impact typically takes like 4 to 5 weeks at a time, just like Ring of Honor does. But the difference, I think, is that Impact doesn't show all these I don't know, house shows, whatever you want to call them, live events. And so that was my problem with watching Ring of Honor television. I think yours as well, was there was such a disconnect because Riccaboni would always talk about things that happened on the TV shows that we hadn't seen yet.
Right.
And it's kind of a tough line to walk, where you're announcing title changes that happen on television without ever actually being able to see it happen on television, or angles that are started on television without actually able to see the angles.
Well,
that's kind of the world that we live in, though, where a lot of fans read the spoilers and spoil themselves on things, and so know what's going to happen. So when you're a fan like myself, or mostly like you, who prefer to watch things play out, then you kind of get ruined on when you're trying to follow everything the Ring of Honor puts out.
Well, and when that spoiler happens because you happen to see Jeff Cobb walk out with the TV title on an NJPW show, that's the kind of stuff that, how was WWE able to do it? How was, MLW does a really good job with it, where they time their TV with their shows. And I get when certain things happen, like Punishment Martinez leaving, okay, Jeff Cobb wins the title, fine. But say it happened at a house show, don't throw it on TV 4 weeks later. just annoying. Sorry.
That's okay. I get it. And then the last piece I had was what was oh yeah. So it was the NJPW show I mentioned this weekend was kind of got shortened. Is that apparently the ambulance company they had hired, because New York State requires you to have EMTs or paramedics at any event you're doing, like a concert, sporting event, wrestling show. And the ambulance company they had contracted with to have people on staff there, supposedly somebody called them and told them that it was canceled. And so it took them an hour and a half to get somebody out there because while FDNY, Fire Department of New York, had someone out there that didn't meet the legal requirements for some reason, and so they had to scramble and try to get somebody out there. And apparently the crowd was really understanding, but still, they were waiting for an hour and a half. The show was mandated to end at 11 o'clock, and so I think the show didn't go off. There wasn't as much on the show as really should have been. It seems like there's always something that's killing these NJPW US shows.
Yeah, I think it might be time for them to pull the plug on them, to be honest. Have they had a successful one yet?
Well, unless you count Madison Square Garden, I guess they're not really.
That was a joint one with Ring of Honor, so...
Well, and that was really sold by the fact that people would buy tickets out to Elite Development there.
Right, and I mean, the one in Dallas was because people thought Moxley would be there and he wasn't.
The one in Dallas only sold 6,000 tickets for an 18,000 seat arena.
Right, and the one where Omega won the U.S. title, didn't that only sell like 3,000 tickets?
Something like that, yeah.
I mean, I love NJPW. I still think they have the best wrestling on the planet. Regardless, I mean, there's so many good companies and there's so many good storylines, but if you're into pure wrestling and watching a great match, tune into any NJPW show and you're almost guaranteed a 5-star match. At least one in a 3-hour show. And I say at least one because sometimes there's 3 or 4. They have the best wrestling on the planet. The problem is they're not connecting with the American audience like they wanted to, and a lot of that is because the elite left.
I agree. They just don't have the stars to shine, to show here in the U.S. Maybe they'll get them again, and they can try this more. But I mean, I think that the U.S. expansion has really been crippled by the fact that the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega especially left the company.
Well, and Cody and Adam Page, who was starting to make a mark, and you also had, I know they were, well, Japan Wrestling, and they left. And then when you've got a guy like Davey Boy Smith, who just ups and leaves, breaks up one of the best tag teams on the planet, and just leaves to go to MLW, that hurt them too.
Yeah. But I do think their biggest draws were Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks.
Oh, obviously. I mean, Kenny Omega was the champion. He was the favorite. So yeah, they were, and the Young Bucks had been every level throughout 6-7 years. They were a force in NJPW. So yeah, I mean, those were the 2 biggest draws, but there were also the ancillary draws too, and we've talked about that before. A lot of the ancillary draws are more important than the main eventers.
Yeah, that's very true. But so I mean, that's basically where. Yeah, so I mean, they've got Kazuchika Okada and Hiroshi Tanahashi still, but I mean, where is their big American draw? There really isn't one anymore.
No, I mean, their biggest close to American draw is actually a New Zealander. I mean, Jay White is probably their biggest. And then when you look at the fact...
They've also got the great British stars like Will Ospreay and Zack Sabre Jr.
Right. But when you look at them, I mean, even Michael Elgin left. And he's now, and he was, when he first came over there, he was a big North American draw. I mean, Ospreay is British. ZSJ is British. Those are 2 that could connect with the American audience, but they're just never going to because most of the American audiences haven't seen them. And Jay White only spent a year in Ring of Honor, so he didn't really get that following that they would have wanted with an American star.
No, he did not. So.
But those right now, and I hate to say it's because of the language barrier, but let's be realistic. A lot of it is because of that. There's very few fans on this planet that are like you and I that can relate to a guy's in-ring work, which is why Sonata is one of our absolute favorites. Really? You're still hungry? How much are you going to eat tonight? This kid has ate his weight in food.
Yeah, and I think Sonata really could. I think Sonata could get over big with the audience, but they've got to actually push him for that to happen.
Yeah, and I think he could get over huge with an American audience if they ever wanted to do an American. What did you do, you little monkey? Here, eat those. Well, then come pick something out. Hey everybody, I got my kid this week. in case you didn't figure that out. It's been a while since we've had this kind of distraction, so. But do you have anything else in your 4 points?
No, those are the 4, and then you had something about NWA. You said.
Yeah, and this came across today, and I literally saw it 3 minutes before we went live.
Okay.
NWA has announced a new weekly show that is starting on Tuesdays at 6:05 p.m. It's called, where is it here? NWA Power. And it's every Tuesday at 6:05 p.m. starting on October 8th, so next week. It's a 1-hour show, and you can watch it right now on Facebook and YouTube, and then every Saturday it'll be on Fight TV.
On the Fight TV app or on the
Fight
Canada thing?
On the Fight TV app.
Okay.
So now, I mean, you and I talked about that, is how are they going to be able to pull this off? Well, MLW has proven that they can pull it off just off YouTube alone. You know, where What Culture failed at it because What Culture didn't really go... Do you want it warmed up? Really? Okay. All right. Where was I? Oh, for some reason, I believe more that these guys are going to succeed in this format on YouTube and Facebook, where What Culture failed, simply because they had Billy Corgan behind them. I'm not really sure who was behind What Culture when they were trying the same thing.
Yeah, I have no idea who was running what Culture at the time. I'm just a little bit taken aback considering that the way they were marketing it, it sounded like they had a TV deal in place, and now it sounds like that really isn't the case.
No, and you're right, it's not. They don't have it unless they were counting their Fight TV app as the TV deal.
Yeah, and the Fight app is a huge thing. I mean, it's been huge for Ring of Honor too. So.
Well. And how many other independent shows have you and I watched on that over the years?
Right. And yeah, I mean that's awesome. I mean, I don't know how much time I'll make for it, but I think it's great that it's on YouTube because I don't think I've ever watched anything on Facebook Live. I certainly have watched YouTube, and that's how I follow MLW, and it may be another one of those things where when I have a little bit of time, that I watch 2 or 3 of those shows at a time,
Right. Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, MLW, they're on beIN Sports, but the main reason why they become so popular is because of YouTube.
Right.
What, Arlo?
Yeah, beIN Sports is available on on DirecTV and on Dish Network, but it isn't something that a lot of cable homes have.
Show me what you...
So mostly it's watching on YouTube or on Fight TV that is the big thing for MLW. And,
True.
and that's the other thing is that when you watch when you're watching on Fight TV or you're watching on YouTube, then you don't have the problems that we were talking about earlier with NXT, where you have commercials in the middle of matches either.
Right, exactly. You do get the odd. Sometimes you get the odd commercial that comes up in the middle of something, but the reality is it doesn't last long. You can skip over it after 10 seconds. It's not a big deal. You don't have to sit through 4.5 minutes of commercials just to get back to the match.
No, not at all. So I think that's really cool, and it's nice to have the NWA back in some capacity,
Well,
and,
yeah,
and I did see there was also I meant to mention this I think on last week's show, or maybe it was the week before even, but I saw that on the NWA channel there's a rematch for the NWA World Tag Team Championship. So I'm wondering if the Villain Enterprises guys are no longer the NWA World Champions, and it's instead the guys that we thought should have won the fucking Crockett Cup in the first place are.
Yeah. That's exactly what happened. Dude, that happened like a month ago.
So the two guys that actually that won that Battle Royal to get into the tournament, they're now the World Tag Team
Yep.
Champions. The guys that we
Yep,
like
they
so
are.
much. Good.
Yeah, they are.
I'll
I'm
have to take a look at that match.
I'm still annoyed that War Raiders aren't, or whatever they were called.
Yeah, but it's good to have heels as the champions so that the faces can chase them.
Good point. That's a good point.
I do think it's odd, with the first world title match is going to be on that new show though. Did you see what that was? They announced it a couple weeks ago, I think it was.
No, I didn't.
Tim Storm is challenging again for the championship.
I don't have a problem with that.
He wanted one more chance.
I really don't have a problem with that because I really started to like Tim Storm because of that 10 Pounds of Gold show that we were watching. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a problem with seeing him compete. I really don't.
Well, I think it just might be a bit of an indictment of what they actually have on that company right now. But hopefully they'll be able to build some stars up there.
I think they will, and I think they've got a lot of good talent in place with Eli Drake, and as much as I like him, Nick Aldis. I know you're not a fan, but I still am.
I'm a fan of his in-ring talent. I really enjoyed that match against Cody at last year's anniversary show, and I really enjoyed his match against Marty Scurll at the Crockett Cup. But I'm still not sold on him being your top draw and your top champion.
When you've got nobody else?
They have Eli Drake and James Storm.
They do now. I mean, I'm just saying they have people now. But you've got
they could put the strap on Marty in April.
But the biggest problem here is right now they have 3 heels as their top draws. They need a big time babyface to come in there.
And Dave Lagana did say on Busted Open that they have not shown all their cards yet. They have other people under contract they have not mentioned. So I guess we'll see.
Oh, nice. I hope that's true, and I hope it's. I mean, there's a lot of big names that are still sitting out there because of Defiant folding and Rev Pro going through their buyout. There are some big names out there that are big that could be huge in America as faces.
Speaking of Defiant folding, you and I were talking earlier about being annoyed with Egan Riccaboni at Death Before Dishonor. And
my God.
One thing I thought he did that was so terrible is you got this new guy on your roster. Part of what makes this new guy special is his music and his ability to do that kind of stuff. And yet when he comes out, the very first time you're hearing his entrance, you're fucking talking over it, you asshole! What the fuck is wrong with you?
And it's funny because even a week ago, you and I were so on board with Ian Riccaboni talking about how he was right behind Kevin Kelly as one of the best announcers on the planet.
And then he went full Michael Cole.
Well, not just Michael Cole. He went Tony Schiavone from WCW. He went Joey Styles from ECW, and Michael Cole. It was brutal. This last show was absolutely brutal to listen to. The fact that he brought out, like you said earlier, where the big boys play, and he kept trashing other companies, talking about if you want real wrestling, this is where you come. It's like, when did he become the announcers from the fucking 90s?
When you've got guys that can entertain you, what is the best thing to let them do?
Let them entertain.
Yep. You show us that they're entertaining. You don't tell us that they're entertaining.
And that's why.
So when he's coming out there and he's talking about how entertaining this guy is, why are you telling us that instead of letting us listen to what he's doing? I really have no idea what the hell that was all about.
That is one thing I will always give Billy Corgan a ton of credit for, is because he has said time and time again with the NWA, you let talented people be talented. And that's how you succeed. And that's one of the things that Vince is finding out in the WWE. It's one of the things that, other wrestling promotions have found out through time, that when you tear up scripts and you handcuff people and not let your talented people be talented, you're going to suffer.
Yeah, and I know that you're not huge on Joel Hendry, but you have to admit that where his value lies is in his ability to entertain.
Well, he has amazing charisma, some of the best I've ever seen. Look, I'll give him his due. I'm not a fan of his because I don't like his character. Has nothing to do with his in-ring ability. I think he's very talented, and I think he could be a top draw in ring. Mm-hmm. He is charisma in spades, and you add to the fact that they play off of his real life because he is legitimately signed to a music contract.
Right.
When you can play off of his real life character and he can create his own entrance music, and he does it every single time for whoever he's facing, and he's an incredibly talented guy in the ring, I have no problem with the guy. It's not my cup of tea. And it's not that I hate him.
And that's the thing that you and I have both embraced, is that not everything has to be for us.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, so
I'm not going to say he's not incredibly talented, because he is. I mean, he's over the moon. This is a guy who I could see with a little more seasoning and some good angles as one of my favorite people on the planet. The problem is he's too much comedy right now. He was too much comedy in Impact. He was too much comedy in Defiant. And so far in Ring of Honor, it's been too much comedy. When I can see a serious side out of him, maybe I'll start to gravitate towards him more. But right now, it's just too much comedy.
See, and I think you have to build that up. I think you have to build that comedy part of it up, and then have him flip the switch.
Hopefully they can do it right. I'm just saying, it's for my taste, my personal taste. Mm-hmm. It's too much comedy right now.
No, I get it, I'm just saying that when you're trying to push somebody as being entertaining and talented, you should shut up and let him be entertaining and talented.
Exactly, and that I agree with. So, I mean, as far as Riccaboni goes, it annoys me because for the last 2 years, I've thought him and Kevin Kelly have been the two best announcers on the planet. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple. And we talked about last week about my issues with Mauro Ranallo, and we all hate Michael Cole. And Rich Bocchini has his issues, and, Alex Marvez has his issues, and Jim Ross is too old, and, they all have their issues. But the two shining stars for us, and it has been for almost 2 years now, has been Ian Riccaboni and Kevin Kelly.
I think that NWA show right off the bat is going to have the top commentary team in wrestling.
Who's that?
Joe Galli and Jim Cornette.
Jim Cornette, to be honest, has changed my view on him so much in his little run that he had with MLW. Mm-hmm. I started to appreciate his announcing so much more. I still think that he got a little bit too caught up in the, olden days wrestling, but I've never seen anybody put everybody over, including his partner, more than Jim Cornette did during that run in MLW.
I agree.
I'm actually,
and I think Joe Galli is just super silky smooth on the play-by-play.
yeah, he is, and I'm glad. I told you last week I started watching MLW or Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Yeah. Dude, you've got to watch that. It's entertaining. It is very entertaining.
I will try to carve out some time for it.
It's my go-to-bed show. Right now, it's my go-to-bed show. When I'm getting ready for bed and I just want to turn something on to fall asleep to, that's what I turn on.
I did also see that the 2 newest Evolve shows are now available on the World Wrestling Network as well.
Nice. I wish I could get that to work on my Fire Stick. Stupid Fire Stick.
I wish you could too. The other thing I wanted to cover that I forgot to mention last week is that I hate this whole Brian Cage angle in Impact.
Yeah, I do too.
I really try to be positive on this show. I'm trying at least, but I mean it doesn't make any sense to have a guy win a world championship, be off TV for 6 weeks, and then get injured again after defending the title, and be off for 4 weeks, and then come back and say, I'm going to be able to defend the title in 6 weeks, and the championship committee said they were going to strip me of the title, and I said, oh no, you're not going to. No way, over my dead body. It's like, okay, then why don't you just have a dead body and we'll take the championship? Now, I can certainly see where a company could get away with doing something like this, but not the same company that one of the ongoing storylines is that they make Taya Valkyrie defend her women's world championship every week. Right. Those two things do not go together. You have to have the same set of rules for one person as you have for another person. Injuries be damned. If you can't defend your title within 30 days, or you won't defend your title within 30 days, and that's your rule, then the title should be stripped. Did I lose you?
No, I'm here. Okay. I was actually thinking more about his engagement storyline that's annoying me more than that. I get where you're coming from, but I'm so sick and tired.
It's stupid because they got married 2 months ago.
Right, exactly. It's just, I get where you're coming from, and I do. But the whole thing, when you said you're going off on a Brian Cage segment, I thought it was seriously going to be the engagement storyline.
No, because that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to build up a more personal angle between Cage and Callahan. You know, I haven't been able to see the latest Impact yet, but I'm fairly certain that Callahan did something to interrupt the wedding, because that's how wrestling weddings go, and that gives a personal issue between Callahan and Cage heading into Bound for Glory in a little bit under a month.
Right. And I really hope Callahan wins the title. I'm sorry. I know Brian Cage is this machine and all this crap, but he's the kind of guy that works so much better as the heel he was in Lucha than the face he is in Impact.
You know, I'm still a Brian Cage fan, but I would say that if you let him keep the title, then you've just got another Brock Lesnar on your hands.
Right. And I think that
because he will have defended the title twice since he won it in April, right? I think Unbreakable was in April when he won it. So.
Right.
So that's just, insane. To have a guy defend the title twice in 6 months and let him keep hold of the championship.
Yeah. How many other title holders? I mean, wasn't Daniel Bryan stripped because of that?
Yeah, pretty much everybody in the history of wrestling has been stripped because of that.
Well, no, there's always been those exceptions.
I know. I agree with that, but so like the large majority of people have been stripped of the title for that.
Yeah. The ones that have been stripped, that's been why.
The only other thing I really wanted to mention from... Well, actually, a couple things I wanted to mention from Death Before Dishonor. One of them is there's no doubt that Angelina Love hitting the Botox on Kelly Klein to win the Women's World Championship is apt because poison was injected completely into that division by that title change.
I agree 110%.
And secondly is you cannot throw darts into the back of a motherfucker. That's where
Another thing
spine.
I disagree with.
That's where you keep your spine. That's where you keep your nervous system. You can't be throwing darts into somebody's back. I mean, you could have the best aim in the world and miss, and you could severely cripple that guy for life. You cannot be doing that shit. I'm a huge Vinny Marseglia fan, but you can't be throwing darts into people's backs.
I agree 100% with that, and it's when I saw your tweet on that on Saturday, I wanted so badly to respond, but I wanted to kind of save it for the show. I agree. That was one of those moments where you see wrestling and you go, what the fuck am I watching?
Yeah.
Because it's like you said. I mean, it's with a thumbtack, it's like a, quarter inch? A dart is what? 3/4 to an inch? That could easily hit somebody's spinal column, crack a nerve, and that guy could be paralyzed for the rest of his life.
Yep, exactly. I just can't understand the mentality of allowing something like that to happen.
I mean, I get it if they have a flak jacket on like Sami Callihan usually does. But Bruiser doesn't have that.
No, it was his bare skin. His shirt was even ripped open before they did it.
And I'm a huge fan of, like you said, Vinny Marseglia. I TK O'Ryan. Those are two of my favorites right now. And of course, Beer City Bruiser. And what are they calling him now? Bruiser Malonis?
Bruiser Malonis. Yep.
Dumb. Just go back to Brian.
Right.
No, go back to Brian. We already have a Bruiser on the team. Go back to Brian. I'm a huge fan of all four guys. But I just think that spot was one of those where it crossed.
It's Brawler Malonis.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
All right, that's still sucks. But I just...
Not that you have a strong opinion on it or anything.
No, not at all. But I think that those four guys are so talented, they didn't need to go to a spot like that. I just don't think they did.
And I know they were doing it to show, Vinny is a horror king, and he might have to be a single for a while because of the concussion issues that, what the fuck's his partner's name has been having?
TK O'Ryan.
TK O'Ryan's been having, but, and that's too bad because I think that guy is snake bit for this wrestling career.
TK O'Ryan, yeah.
When we get something going, something happens, And having those concussions, that's a tough thing to come back from now.
It really is, yeah. I mean, that's what Daniel Bryan was out 2.5 years for.
Right.
Or was it even longer? Wasn't it longer? It was almost 3 years?
I think it was, it was 2 years, and he was back for a match or two, and then it was it was a year, then he's back for another match or two, then it was 2 years after that. So
yeah,
so basically 3 years.
Right. And concussions aren't something that they're taking lightly anymore. And it sucks because TK O'Ryan is so talented. But some people are just snake bit. They just are.
The only good thing about it is it gives him some time to build up that upper body that we've talked about a couple of times on the show before.
Right, exactly.
So he can fill out a bit more before his comeback. All right. Anything else you want to cover before we roll into the Chris Benoit thing?
Not really, because Arlo is out here again wanting more chocolate milk.
Okay.
And I have an overactive child for some reason. It might be because of all the chocolate milk. I'm just saying.
Might be because he's your child too.
Well, there is that. There is definitely that. No, I have nothing. I mean, I really want to, and I apologize for only going an hour live here, but I really want to save my voice. As everyone can hear, it's not the greatest tonight. I really want to say,
It does sound better than it did this afternoon, though. I have to say that.
well, since I've been home, it's been nothing but honey and tea. I really wanted to go live as long as I could. So I just have been guzzling honey and tea just to kind of coat it a little bit. But I really want it to be great for this Wednesday because I think that's a landmark show. And I think it's something that you and I have an opportunity to hit a home run on. And I really want to do it. So.
Yeah. So we will be back with you on Wednesday to talk about AEW. Right after the show goes off the air, we will be going live to talk about it. Coming up on that show, so far announced, to open the show, it's Cody Rhodes against our boy, the best ever, Sammy Guevara.
I still want him to go back to his original Mr. Money's Worth.
I do too, but that's not what he is right now. There's also Brandon Cutler versus MJF. Did you ever watch that promo on MJF? I told you you should check out that episode of Road to AEW for.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, it was.
And MJF, look, MJF's tweets. If you're not following MJF on Twitter, you're missing out. He has got some of the most phenomenal tweets ever, especially when he got on his Dungeon of Doom kick. Definitely, you need to follow MJF on Twitter.
And if you have not seen the Road to AEW, I think it's episode 2 or 3? I can't remember. 2, I think it is.
Yeah, it was 2.
I'm going to explain. I'm going to tell you a little bit what he does, just so you can actually see it for yourself. But a guy comes up to him and hands him a cup of coffee, and then the guy holds out his hand like he wants a tip, and MJF says, "Oh man, that is so thoughtful." Takes the gum he's chewing out of his mouth and puts it in the guy's hand. And then, as the guy is still standing there in shock, like, what the hell are you talking about? Tony Schiavone tells MJF, as MJF starts drinking his coffee, who his opponent's going to be on the first episode of AEW Dynamite, and MJF spits the coffee out all over the guy's face, burning the guy's face that still has the gum in his hand. It's just spectacular.
There is... MJF is a guy that you need to go back. Anyone that wants to know about this guy needs to go back over the last, almost 2 years now with MLW TV and just watch what he is. He is easily the greatest heel on the planet right now.
This is a guy who was interested in Joey Janela's girlfriend, not Penelope Ford, but his girlfriend in MLW. But he wouldn't get with her until she went to finishing school.
Aria Blake, yeah.
It's fantastic.
I look, he's got a long way to go in the ring. I think he is still behind, and maybe it's because I haven't seen him much in those epic type matches like we have with Jay White and we have with Matt Taven. But on the mic, he is light years ahead of both those guys. Light years.
He has a lot to go in the ring as far as being a move performer, but right. Nobody gets heat like MJF does.
No, nobody does. And he is great when he can be that slimy heel who is sneaking under the ring during Royal Rumbles or Rumble matches and all that stuff. He is so good. I think once he can get to that talent that Taven, who's 10 years older than him, and even Jay White, who's like 6 or 7 years older than him, once he can get to that level professionally in the ring, I think we're going to be looking at the next, and I don't want to say this because I know you get, but when you compare greatest heels of all time, Ric Flair is right up there. Ric Flair could talk, he could wrestle, he could do it all. And I seriously think that in 10, 15 years, we're going to be talking about MJF the way people talk about Ric Flair right now.
People that are not named me, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I would say he's more Piper than Flair, but that's just me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because Piper on the stick, But I never saw Piper put on that 5-star classic.
I was talking
I
about
mean,
the stick.
on the stick, yeah, I'm talking about that total package where he is that
No, that's Lex
up-
Luger.
Lex. Shut up. I'm talking about the guy who's top on the stick, top in the ring. Is that complete mess. He is Piper on the stick, but he has not mastered that. God, who do you want to compare him to? AJ Styles in the ring?
Oh, I see. So you're saying he's like Randy Savage then, a total package in that way.
Right now, yeah.
Do you see how far I'm going to not give any credit to Ric Flair?
Yeah, I see. And you're an asshole for it. Just Flair's a guy who's wrestling.
I've said many times that Flair has had 3 great years where he was the best wrestler in the world.
But
But I still think overall he's overrated.
He became 92, 93.
What's that?
He became overrated probably in the early 90s. I'd say 93.
I think 92 was one of his best years. I think 83, 89, and 92 are his 3 best years.
See, and I would have said 89, 88. 88, 89, those two. And 83, of course. But also his work in the 70s was amazing.
Oh,
it absolutely was.
88, you mean the year that he refused to put Lex Luger over? Yeah, he was a great wrestler that year.
Because Lex...
What's that?
Lex Luger, the guy that could do 2.5 moves.
Lex Luger is fucking fantastic in the ring. Watch him. Don't just believe the hype that's been given over the years. He was absolutely fantastic.
All right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch some Lex Luger as I'm lying in bed dying because I did this show for more than an hour tonight.
Other things on the AEW show on Wednesday night that we're going to be covering that have been announced so far are Riho taking on Nyla Rose to become the first ever women's champion. Jeff's got Riho, Nyla, and also the main event is scheduled to be the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega against Chris Jericho and 2 mystery opponents.
Yeah, we know who that is.
You think you know who that is?
No, it's the 2 guys that aren't in the goddamn tournament.
So that's what we'll be covering on Wednesday. Tomorrow, tune into the Global Revolution. On Wednesday, also tune into Sports Entertainment is Dead. On Thursday, Imp's LOP Radio Adventure. On Friday, The Right Side of the Pond. And then we'll be back with more Kingdom of Honor next Monday. Until then, that's all we've got. We'll try to do better next time.
Not all we have. It's not all we have.
That's all we have live.
Well, you still have to follow us on Twitter.
I thought you did all that stuff earlier. Did you not? With
No.
The Patreon stuff?
No, I talked about...
Well, then get on with it, brother.
Oh, my dear God. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Regi Co-op. He's at Zanman LOP.
You do everything around here.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm the sick one. You can find us the best by just hashtag KOH that we do everything on. And coming up this Wednesday, it's hashtag Dad. So you follow us on those.
After Dark.
Right, exactly. So, use those hashtags, find us, follow us personally. It's greatly appreciated. Also, go to our Patreon, patreon.com/Kingdom of Honor. We do a lot of exclusive content, and you're about to hear one of our favorites. To be honest, out of all of the episodes we've ever done, going back to 2014, we've been doing this for a long 15. We've been doing this for a long time. This Chris Benoit episode that you're about to hear is one of my favorites. I've listened to it multiple times, and I still get chills. The thing we do not talk about personal lives. We take a wrestler that we like. We pick out the 4 best matches or moments that they did throughout their career. And then Shane and I get together and we compare our 4. Sometimes they match up, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're 5-star classics, sometimes they're just 1-star pieces of shit that we relate to. But that is on our top tier on Patreon. You're about to get a free listen to that that special that we do. And of course, Facebook, Kingdom of Honor, and all of our other socials. You can follow us, or if you want to send me any kind of message to tell us how much Shane sucks, I'm okay with that. Go to kingdomofhonor123@gmail.com. I will make sure that he hears it.
Wow. After that, I should say something about you not being able to count to 1, 2, 3, but whatever.
Well, that's fair. As sick as I am right now, I'm barely able to.
And I'll say, doing these Wrecked with Wrestlers shows, the thing that I've discovered that I've loved the most out of the matches I've discovered doing this was Harley Race versus Terry Funk, which is available on the NWA channel of YouTube. So you can watch that for free. Just give yourself about 55 minutes to do so.
And that's the other thing, too, and I didn't want to really get into it, but, sometimes we pick wrestlers that we think we know what our favorites are, but then when we go back and we watch others, we realize that we're not even close, and that happened to both of us with Harley Race.
So without further ado, we'll see you on Wednesday, and here is Chris Benoit. Hello, wrestling fans. This is your usual host of Kingdom of Honor, Shane Sabunia, the expatriate of expatriates, Zanman, along with my good buddy, Jeff, and we're here today to talk to you our first ever Wrecked with Wrestlers episodes. This is an ancillary project that that you get as part of your Patreon subscription to us, and we really appreciate you buying a subscription and tuning into our show today. This is kind of a desert island or I guess like a wine cellar collection or a time capsule thing where it's basically we're going to each episode of this show we're going to talk about a wrestler, their career, what we thought of their career, and we're each going to pick some matches that we would put towards or that we would choose to bring with us if we had to be stranded on a desert island for these guys to watch.
What do you mean had to be stranded? That's where I'm moving when I get enough money.
Okay, that's cool. Have you picked out your own island yet?
I'm going to find one. Maybe the Lost Island.
And you're going to be along there with Smokey and everything?
I'm hoping.
Cool.
I mean, if I'm going to go there, I hope there's some entertainment.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about is what entertainment we bring with us.
I guess outside of the wrestling I'm going to bring with.
And the person that you're going to bring to wrestle with.
Right, exactly.
Bada bing. So this week we're going to talk about our first debut episode. One of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Controversial figure because of what happened the last few days of his life, but something that I think gets kind of pushed aside in greatest wrestler ever discussions because of that, which I honestly don't think is fair. And that is the Canadian crippler, the Wolverine, Chris Benoit.
Well, yeah, and I agree. And I don't want to spend too much time on personal lives and things like that. I want this to be solely about the performer. But I do understand why he gets kind of, I guess, forgotten with the horrific tragedy that happened at the end of his life. It makes sense why people want to distance themselves from that, but I do think it's a disservice because he was such an integral part of the last half of the decade of the 90s and the first 4 or 5 years of the 2000s. And if it wasn't for Chris Benoit, I don't know that there would have been as quality wrestling as there was.
Absolutely true. And I guess the way that I look at it is that there's way too many people out there that can't set aside the artist for the art. If you were, if you were a fan of Cary Grant's movies and he, when he was a leading man and you found out he was gay, would all of a sudden those roles not mean anything to you? If you were a fan of Quentin Tarantino movies and you heard about the things that happened, with Uma Thurman on the Kill Bill set, would those movies no longer have any meaning to you because Quentin Tarantino made them? I think that I realize what Benoit did in the last few days of his life was more extreme than that. On the other hand, I think that wasn't the real Chris Benoit that did that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean,
it was a lot of what contributed to his and his family's death was the sacrifices that he made for his art, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I know when they did the autopsy, they said that he had the brain of an 80-year-old and things like that. So, I mean, all those headbutts and chair shots and of course the steroids all led to that degeneration of his brain. But you touched on something there. It's like, granted, what you heard about Quentin Tarantino, that was hearsay, but you can look at people like Elton John and Freddie Mercury. You can look at the things Elvis Presley did, or even look at Jim Morrison and Kurt Cobain and people like that. Do you hate their music now because of who they are as people or what they believe in? Or, John Lennon's another one. Look at how controversial he was towards the end of his life. It doesn't make you hate their music, so why should you hate anybody else's art because of things that happened in their personal lives?
Well, and another example that I thought about as you were saying that is, and it's something that I've really never paid, that was never a fan of anyway. But what about Woody Allen? He's out there still making movies that are still popular after he was dating and then married his 17-year-old stepdaughter.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another perfect example. And people kind of they make fun of it, but they don't hate him and what he's done because of it.
Right, and they don't ignore his work because of it.
Right, exactly. He still gets credit for what he did, and I mean, what he did is not my cup of tea as a comedy either, but it is for a lot of people. A lot of people enjoy that kind of smart comedy. So he, and I don't want to get off topic here because we're kind of diverting, but we get the point. I mean, and that's one thing that I don't want to do is I want to focus on just the art during these shows, because we're going to talk about some people that had controversial lives outside of the wrestling ring, outside of the promo box, and I want to stick with what they did in the ring, what they did for promos in their career as a.
I agree. I just thought it was important in this particular case to explain that we're not we're aware of what happened. We're not trying to we're just going to kind of ignore what happened intentionally because we want to talk about the wrestler, not about the person.
And believe me, this is a tough one because of the horrific tragedy that happened. It's a tough one to navigate, a tough one to go through without actually bringing it up. And to be honest, as much as I like to separate the performer from the person, it is difficult in this situation because of what had. But,
So I guess starting at the beginning, I think the first time that I ever saw Chris Benoit wrestle was in WCW, probably around '92, when he was part of the NWA World Tag Team Championship tournament. This was after the NWA had kind of returned to WCW, not really merged again with them, but they were featured on WCW programming. And I believe that tournament was eventually won by Dr. Dusty Williams and Terry Bam Bam Gordy. But I remember seeing Chris Benoit teaming up with a guy named Beef Wellington, also from Canada. And it just struck me at that time how great he was. This again was early in his career, but it was, his intensity, his technical ability, his high flying, and even at that time, I was like, wow, this guy's like a high flying Bret Hart, and basically from that point on, I couldn't get enough of the guy, and every time that he showed up in WCW, I was extremely happy.
See, and my first times watching him were as a tag team with Fly and Brian, as a member of the Horsemen. When they were both members of the Horsemen, they had that unique logo as the young Horsemen on the side of their trunks and all that stuff. That's really when I first started to notice Chris Benoit and probably first watched him. Since then, I've gone back and I've watched his stuff like that tournament from '92 and his ECW work. But that was really the first time that I noticed him, and he was one of those guys that the moment I saw him, I was hooked. He was so unique. Because he was so technically gifted, and he had that high flying ability, and on top of it, that I was just entranced by everything he did. The one thing that I will say about Benoit, that I don't know that anybody, There might have been a few people here and there, but the majority of the people would never say he was their favorite wrestler. And that was quite simply because he wasn't flashy. He didn't come out with long flowing robes and dancing. He wasn't mesmerizing on the mic. He couldn't cut a promo really. I've always called him a five-tool player because when he did talk, you listened and you felt what he was saying, but he was never that guy that was going to go out there and cut a promo that people were going to talk about for 20 years. But he was that kind of guy that no matter what he did in that ring, he wasn't a bathroom break. He wasn't he was the guy that when he was in that ring, all eyes were glued on that ring because you knew there was going to be greatness.
Absolutely. And what you said about him, he actually was my favorite wrestler while he was still alive, probably from like 2000. Well, I'm trying to think, because probably from the moment that Brett retired, it was neck and neck between him and Chris Jericho as to who was my favorite wrestler. And people would say things like that, like he's not entertaining, or he's not the entertainer that that other guys are. So he falls a bit short in my eyes. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? Pro wrestling is entertainment.
Right.
And to me, the intensity that he carried himself with, the way that he wrestled in the ring, that was the entertaining part to me, and that's why he was my favorite at that time. And the thing was, like you said, he didn't really have the best mic skills, but people often equate mic skills to charisma. They are not the same thing. Chris Benoit had charisma in spades. He just wasn't necessarily the most gifted on the microphone.
Well, the difference is, and I would argue the fact, I think he was incredibly gifted on the microphone. I think he was the kind of guy that when he talked, you listened. He wasn't, the reason why people say, oh, he wasn't that great on the mic is because he wasn't going to make you roll on the floor laughing like The Rock, Flair. He didn't have that like burning intensity and catchphrases like Arn Anderson and Stone Cold had, or Hulk or Savage, or he didn't rely on catchphrases. He didn't rely on comedy. He just told you what he thought and what he felt, and the way that he spoke, you believed what he was saying because he believed what he was saying.
And I think that's why he was. I think that's why in a company like WCW that focused so much more on the real and the intensity, when it wasn't guys like Hogan and Savage on top, that he was becoming the top guy in that company when he decided to leave.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that he would have. I mean, the same thing is true of Steve Austin. If Hulk Hogan had never shown up in WCW, Steve Austin would have been the top guy there. Dustin Rhodes would have been a top guy there, because even if they weren't, flashy on the mic or funny on the mic like Austin eventually became, they were intense, they were real. You could believe what they said, just like you could Arn Anderson or Ole Anderson or Tully Blanchard. And I mean, I know I knew a bunch of guys that are in the Horsemen, but I mean, those are the kind of guys that really in WCW at the time stood out as top level heels mostly, but I think that guys like DDP, Chris Benoit were getting over that way as a babyface, and Benoit basically was about to be the top star in WCW when he decided to leave, mostly because he didn't trust the guy that was booking him.
Oh yeah, I mean he was the top star when he left. There was no doubt about it. They put the title on him in hopes to keep him. But like you said, it was at the end of his career, or things had changed. Kevin Sullivan came back into the picture as the booker, and he didn't trust the way that he was going to be treated in the company.
And you can't really blame him for it, because when you more or less steal a guy's wife from him, it's hard to believe that the guy's going to do the right thing by you and not try to get some kind of petty revenge.
Right, exactly. And you go back to that, and that's when I really fell in love with Chris Benoit, was when that was a storyline. When him stealing Nancy Sullivan was a storyline before it actually became reality, and Kevin Sullivan and Benoit had that just insane feud after Brian Pillman left. And I think one of the matches you picked actually was part of that feud in that last man standing match from Great American Bash. Did you pick that one, or did you?
No, I didn't.
You dumped that one afterwards. Okay.
That was originally one of your picks.
It was, and then as I was going through it, the problem is there's so many Benoit matches that I think back of fondly and just love, that it was really hard for me to narrow it down to just 4. And I was a little disappointed because one of my 4 ended up being a dud when I went and watched it back. Actually, 2 of my 4 ended up being duds. That one, the one that we talked about on King of Honor was a couple weeks ago about the Triple H, the one from WrestleMania 20, with HBK, Triple H, and Benoit. It seemed like such a dated match with the way Triple H performed. That it really wasn't as good as I remember it. And there was another one from an episode of SmackDown that he had against Kurt Angle that I always thought back and thought, oh, that was such a great match. That was such a great match. And then when I watched it back, I'm like, how could these 2 guys who are legendary in-ring performers put on a match like this? So, I mean, throughout the course of time...
the thing is that, at the time, when you see something like that, the thing is that, did your opinion change? And obviously our opinions are always changing when we're watching things. We're never the same person watching something as we were the previous time we watched it. We've always got life experiencing that's changing us. But I mean, in the last 18 years, we've seen so many high spot matches and stuff. Excuse me, I didn't want to cough on the microphone. But I see so many things changing in the high spots and things that, it may just have covered your perception from what it was 17, 18 years ago.
Yeah, and I thought that too, but one of the matches that I did pick was high spot free, and I thought it was still just as great as I thought it was back then. I didn't buy into the story. I thought that Triple H's performance was the part that kept me from falling in love with it again. And it wasn't Benoit. Benoit was Benoit, and he was still his great self. But the match itself, the quality to me had fallen down because of Triple H's performance and how it didn't hold up. And it was the same thing on that SmackDown one that I talked about. Is that I don't know if it was the commentary. I don't know if it was the fact that the crowd was kind of sitting on its hands. But it just didn't seem to hold up and have the same to me that it did back then.
Gotcha.
If that makes any sense at all, but
it does. And one of the matches that I watched, I had never seen before, which was a match that I told you that I picked, and you said it was. Oh, you said, "Oh my God, that's a great match." Was
the Steve Austin one? Yeah.
No, not that one. The Jeff Jarrett Chris Benoit ladder match from Starrcade '99.
Oh, that was a good one too.
So good, and it was so much ahead of its time. There were so many things on there that you would see in today's ladder matches that you really hadn't seen to that point. So I mean, and none of the matches, I guess none of the matches that I picked was I necessarily disappointed with. There was one match from Nitro that I was thinking I would include, but I watched it and I was like, and it ended with a Steve Michael chair shot to Eddie Guerrero. I mean, not chair shot, but briefcase shot to Eddie Guerrero that cost Guerrero the match, got Benoit the pin. I was like, no, I'm not going to pick a match that has that kind of bullshit in it.
Well, and I think I watched probably about a dozen matches of Benoit's, and I don't think I hit any of the ones that you're talking about. I mean, the Jarrett one, I remember very well because that was such a great match. But that wasn't one of the ones I picked. But I did pick. I think I went through 10 or 12 different matches, and I whittled down to the 4 that I thought were the best. And ironically, the 4 that I ended up picking were 4 out of the 5 that I had picked to begin with. When I first made a list of matches that I wanted to go back and watch, the first 5 out of my head were the 4 that I picked, and also that WrestleMania match that when I went back and watched was like, ugh, I wouldn't want to watch that over and over again. I just couldn't. But it is ironic because like the 4 out of my 5 top matches, the ones that hold the most in my head, the ones that I remember, when I went back and watched them, I felt the same emotion that I felt back in 1999 and 2000 and 2001, which was I was very, very pleased that I was able to have that kind of emotion still for matches that happened almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's actually really funny that you kind of pushed aside the Benoit Michaels Triple H match, because a couple years ago Doc and I did a show where we just picked basically 10 matches each, all encompassing of wrestling that we would bring to the desert island with us. And I had 2 triple threat matches on there. I had that one, and then I had what I think is probably the best triple threat match of all time, Christopher Daniels versus Samoa Joe versus AJ Styles from was it Unbreakable 2005?
No, it was It wasn't Unbreakable. I can't remember what it was, but it was 2005.
Yeah, yeah. So I picked what I think is the greatest triple threat match of all time, and then what I think is the best triple threat match of all time. And so it's only been a couple of years since I watched those two Benoit Michaels Triple H triple threat matches from 2004 back to back, and I didn't feel it at all the same way you did. But I think I was just so caught up in Benoit. I mean, it's been 12 years now since we've seen anything fresh from Chris Benoit, and it's so. I mean, anytime I get to see him on my screen, I think that I just naturally react, to him again, like I'm getting to see my favorite wrestler again. That's awesome.
Well, the thing, and Benoit's performance was amazing. The crowd was behind him. I loved the chemistry that he had between all three guys was really good. It was just the part, and I thought Shawn Michaels played his part amazingly, as he always does. I mean, he's Mr. WrestleMania for a reason. He shows up on the big stage, and he was amazing. Benoit was amazing. Triple H was Triple H. And the problem with Triple H is Triple H wasn't Triple H from 2019. Triple H was Triple H from 2005 when it was all about him, and he was, rightfully so, he was the top heel in the company, and the way most bookers book things is they book the heel as the top guy, and the babyface chases that heel. The problem is that Triple H never let the heel or never let the face go over. He always had to end up burying and being the guy that won the feud every single time. And even though Benoit got the eventual submission on Triple H and won the match with a crippler crossface, the Triple H from 2005 was prevalent throughout that entire match. He was an unstoppable force. He was getting himself over constantly throughout the match. There were spots in it that just didn't make any sense. Like there was at the final bell when he is fighting the crippler crossface, he's close to the ropes and he's reaching for the ropes and he can't quite make the ropes, but his foot was basically touching the rope and he didn't just stick his foot out. It was that kind of storytelling right there that I was like, okay, I can't. No, if they're not going to pay that close of attention to those details, I can't have this as one of my top matches.
Did you ever consider watching the Backlash one to see if you would have that one in your list?
So soured. I was so soured on it. That was one of my original ones that I'd picked too, because I put down a list of like 12 or 13 of them, and that was on my original list too. But after the WrestleMania one, I was just so soured on it, I just jumped to my next one.
Because the thing with the Backlash match is that the crowd almost turns Triple H, not Triple H, but Shawn Michaels into the number one heel in that match because of where it takes place.
Yeah,
it takes place in Montreal.
Right.
And so the crowd really, as they always are in Canada, is not only bizarro but also completely against Shawn fucking Michaels.
It was funny because the WrestleMania one, Triple H was the clear heel, Benoit was the clear face, and Michaels was kind of somewhere in between. He was a tweener throughout the match where he did a lot of heel antics, but at the same time he got cheered. The way that he interacted with Benoit, he came off as a face. So it was a weird dynamic where you don't normally see that kind of interaction. There's always that one baby face going up against two solid heels, and in this instance, Shawn Michaels played the tweener throughout the entire match, which made it fun and interesting. But it was just Triple H's performance that kept me from saying, okay, that is one of the greatest triple threats of all time.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I know that you said another one originally your list that we mentioned was Kevin Sullivan versus Chris Benoit in that hardcore match.
Right.
And I really did enjoy that match. It just, to me, wasn't the example of the Chris Benoit that I remember. It wasn't the Chris Benoit that I love so much with the technical skill, and it was a lot more brawling, like him beating Kevin Sullivan in a bathroom and sticking his head in the toilet and all this other kind of shit that I just don't want to associate with Chris Benoit if I'm going to be watching these matches over and over again.
Well, and that's the thing too, and I mentioned this I don't know if I mentioned it to you. I did write a blog about this. A lot of reasons I do these blogs is not only because I want to get my feelings out there, and I can't always do that when we're talking on the radio, because you mentioned something, it leads me in a whole nother territory, and when I write the blogs, I can just get whatever I'm thinking out on paper or whatever. The other reason I do it is for notes. I like to have these notes present so that I remember some of this stuff when we're talking about it on the air. And it's funny you mentioned that about the street fight. Well, I don't know, street fight. It was Falls Count Anywhere match with him and Kevin Sullivan, is because I actually wrote in here in one of my matches because
it was a 24/7 match.
Was it? Okay. Yeah.
No. I was being a smartass.
Did our truth come running out and they both pinned him to win the title? What a joke that was.
My favorite ever 24, well, I guess hardcore title pin was when Big Show pinned Rhino against the wall. That was awesome.
My favorite one from back in the day, the 24/7 or the hardcore match with the Crash Holly 24/7 rule, was when Pete Gass and Rodney cornered him at the McDonald's Playland and pinned him in the ball pit. Still one of my all-time favorite moments.
Okay.
But anyway, moving on from that, I picked 3 matches that were technically sound. I mean, they were just perfect examples of what Benoit is. But one of the matches I picked was a little more of a hardcore type style match. And the thing I liked about those matches is that Benoit was completely out of his element throughout the entire match. He just, that street fight, any ladder matches he did, any matches that he did where they had somewhat of a hardcore stipulation, you could just see the uncomfortableness and the fact that he was out of his element, but he was still able to pull it off and make it a believable match and get the technical ability in there and everything else. So he didn't do them often. He was out of his element when he did them, but when he did them, he was able to pull them off.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely a true professional that way. It's just, like I said, it's not that he was bad at it or anything like that. It was more that it wasn't the way that I would choose to remember Chris Benoit.
And there's one thing too that I understand that completely. And there's one thing that I listen to the Edge of Christian podcast. That's what I've been hooked on lately. And one of the things they talked about Benoit at one point. And one of the things they talked about is how nowadays in wrestling you have bookers in the back that script matches. And, there were always people like Savage was known for that and other people. But they talked about, some of these people that they've wrestled against. And they said Chris Benoit was a guy, you just tell him the ending and you just go and you just follow his lead. William Regal's another guy like that. And they're guys that you just, they want to call everything in the ring. They want to feel the crowd. They want to see what's working, and if it's not working, they want to get away from it. And they literally would call matches from start to finish in the ring as long as they knew the ending, which I thought it's such a unique skill.
That's not what it used to be.
Yeah, but it's such a unique skill that you don't think about anymore. You see these performances and you don't realize that in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, that's how these guys did that. They did all of that on the fly. It's different when you can sit back and you can think about a match and how you're going to do this match and plan it out exactly the way you want to do it. But when you can call it on the fly like that, it's just, that's such a skill that is so underrated.
I think that's how most wrestlers do it still these days. It's just not in WWE.
Well,
I think in Ring of Honor, I think in New Japan. I think that's still how they're doing it.
I would have thought that, but when Benoit and Omega botched that finish and they went right back to do it again, it starts to make me second guess. When they botched that DDT finish out of the One-Winged Angel.
Jericho and Omega.
Yeah, Jericho and Omega, yeah.
Yeah,
At
okay.
Double or Nothing.
Yeah.
When I saw them botch that finish and not just roll with it, but actually go back and redo the finish, that's when I kind of second guess how much of it is planned out ahead of time and how much is called.
Right. I mean, I think they definitely have their spots that they know they're going to do, but I think a lot of it is still just called, in the ring.
I hope so.
I mean, to me, that it's a lot more of an acting skill to remember all these different set pieces and scripts and what I'm going to do at this particular second than it is being a pro wrestler.
Yeah, it is such an underrated skill though. When you think about what a wrestler has to do to feel what the crowd is into and go from it there. Where you've got they're going in one direction. They're like, oh, the crowd's not into this, so let's hit this spot here, and then let's hit this spot here, and they just kind of keep going with it and changing it on the fly like that. That's just
we kind of talked a little bit about this on the first Kingdom of Honor we ever did, where the rumor was that Marty Scurll and Kazuchika Okada had gone, like, was it 11 minutes over?
Yeah.
And we talked about how that was, if that were the case, it was probably because they kind of had to, slow down the crowd. They kind of had to feel things out because the crowd wasn't super into it at the beginning of it. And we talked about that, how they would have had to, kind of build it back up to where it needed to be. It turns out that wasn't actually the case. They didn't actually go 11 minutes over. But I mean, that's something that I think, I still think that for the most part in the world of pro wrestling, you don't have these guys that are scripting everything. I mean, can you imagine having a Pro Wrestling Guerrilla or, these indie shows? No, I mean, they're out there calling it on the fly.
Well, yeah, because these guys are calling in people that they've never worked with before, and they show up the night before to wrestle them. So yeah, I guess I do see your point there. They probably still are doing that.
Right. I mean, and like for an example, like the ladder match that we saw for the ROH World Title at Super G1 Supercard. I'm sure that the spot with Matt Taven's fingers being broken and not being able to climb up the ladder, I'm sure that was scripted. Or I'm sure that's something they talked about beforehand, and I'm sure like some of the ladder spots were, but I don't think that every single thing they do in the match is. I mean, I think they kind of hit like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do this. But I think the rest of it is pretty much on the fly.
I think maybe that's what they were getting at with Benoit, is that he never wanted to script any spots. He didn't want to say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to somehow work this into the match. Maybe we'll do this move. It's just, okay, you're going over. Well, let's go out there and do this.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of, I think, where they were going with that, is that certain people wanted to, they would get together and talk to people before the match. Okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to do this spot? Do you want to do that spot or whatever? But Benoit was the kind of guy saying, oh, you're supposed to win? Let's just work on it when we're out there. And they would just go out and do a match.
And, like judging from all the finishes all the bad finishes they had in WCW, that's probably a good idea that he was out there being the one figuring it out.
Right, exactly, because they had some terrible ones. But anyway, we should probably get on with the actual matches that we picked.
Yeah, I mean, you had talked about how you watched like a dozen matches trying to narrow yours down to the 4 that you ended up with. I personally didn't take that kind of time. I mean, I wish I would have, because there was a match that I really enjoyed from Nitro that I just didn't have a chance to find. I mean, I know it was Chris Benoit versus Eddie Guerrero. I know it was a match that I was super into when I first watched it, and I know how it ended. I know that that Chris Benoit always did that superplex where he would like flop over onto his belly afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the match ended with those two guys both getting counted out to a 10 count in the middle of the ring. I mentioned this on King of Honor the other day. But there were so many Nitros where matches between the two guys, I was like, I don't have time to watch all these matches. So I did end up finding what is actually Chris Benoit's Nitro debut. I mean, we mentioned he was in WCW 92. He was there in 94. He was there in 93. But he never really was a constant in that organization until this debut on Nitro in 1995. And this was also against Eddie Guerrero. And what I really enjoyed so much about this match was the story that it told. This was back before the Crippler Crossface, when Benoit's finisher was the Dragon Suplex, which to me is still an awesome finishing move. And in this match, he had hurt Eddie's arm. Eddie had hurt his leg, and so they're battling it out in the ring with those two injuries. And Eddie almost gets the victory, but then he goes to punch Benoit, and he hits him with the bad hand that Benoit's been working on the entire match. And so Eddie like flinches and turns around to shake his hand out, and Benoit uses that moment to hit him with the flash dragon suplex and pin him in the middle of the ring. It was just a great intro, I thought, to Benoit. Eddie looked great in it too, because he just looked like he was about to win, but he made that one mistake. And this was a match that didn't hurt either guy, but showed how good both guys were, and did a great job of getting getting Benoit to that spot where he needed to be, because it was not too long after this where he would be joining as the 4th member of the Horsemen with Benoit, or with Pillman, Anderson, and Flair.
I don't honestly remember that match. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that one.
Not surprisingly, it's something like it's from October of 1995, so we're talking 24 years ago, dude.
Well, I mean, I've got a memory. I've got a memory in a body like an elephant, so I usually remember things. But that one, I don't know if I ever even saw it. To be honest with you, I mean, I've gone back and watched a lot of his older stuff, but I don't honestly remember if I ever even saw that match. I'll have to definitely go back and watch that.
Yeah, it was actually on the same card where the main event was Sting and Flair taking on Anderson and Pillman.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, it's like right at that time where Flair's about to turn on Sting at that I think it was Halloween Havoc, and then they kind of off to the races with that version of the Horseman from there.
Okay, and I remember that angle. I remember clearly, especially the turn. But yeah, I'm gonna have to definitely go back and watch that match. Was that one of the 4 that you would have brought with you?
Yeah, that was just because first of all, it had Eddie Guerrero in it,
Right.
who was one of Benoit's best friends. Speaking of which, that's actually another reason I probably would have kept the triple threat in there if I were you, is because the way that it ends is with those two guys hugging in the middle of the ring at WrestleMania, with all the confetti coming down.
By then, I was so out of it because of Triple H. I just couldn't do it.
And like I said, I think the story that they tell, I think Benoit's introduction to a live audience for the first time ever, other than like maybe a Clash of the Champions, but on TNT, on the hottest show in wrestling at that time, because it was soon after Nitro had started. I think it's a great match to keep in there because it just so much fire.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if it was a great match, and obviously, the first match that I picked, and it's probably my favorite match, and it's my favorite match for a lot of reasons.
Ever or just a Benoit?
Ever.
Okay.
The triple threat from WrestleMania 16 against Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho for the IC, the 2 out of 3 falls match for the IC and European Championships. I think some of the parts of that I liked the most was that was the very first WrestleMania for all 3 of these future legends. The very first time any of them competed in WrestleMania was in this match. I thought the match was great for the fact that you had literally 3 heels in the ring, and I mean obviously Jericho with his talk and his voice and the way he was on the mic kind of outshone him and became a fan favorite because of some of the stuff that he was saying. Like I think he called him Kirk Angel and Mr. Roboto. Was the way he introduced the 2 of them, and just his charisma and everything there. The fact that everybody in that match, they got their high spots in, they got every one of their moves into this match at some point. There was the finish to the second fall, I think might have been my favorite part, where Angle goes and misses that moonsault, and then Benoit hits. I'm trying to remember how this worked, but Benoit had a crippler crossface on, and it somehow got Jericho did a lion salt, landed on top of him, and pinned him for the win, or pinned him for the victory. Landed on Benoit, and both Jericho and Benoit left it taking both of Kurt Angle's titles, and Kurt never got pinned throughout the match. I thought the performance of all 3 of them was amazing. I thought the fact that you really got to see Benoit. And, I mean, you talk about Brock Lesnar being the mayor of Suplex City. Benoit was the original mayor. Because his 3 German suplexes, that snap suplex that he did, all of that was just an amazing performance out of him throughout the entire match. An amazing performance out of all 3 of them. So, I mean, if I'm going to go to a desert island, I want to get, one of Kurt, one of Chris, and one of Kurt and one of each of the Chris's. And I get it all in this match here.
Yeah, and that's one of those. That's one of the few matches where you're going to see a triple threat where all 3 guys leave the match looking stronger than they went in.
Oh yeah.
Because even though Kurt was a double champion coming in, he still looked amazing coming out because, like you said, he lost those championships without ever being pinned. So he's facing two of the greatest wrestlers in the world, and neither one of them can pin him.
Right.
Meanwhile, Jericho pins Benoit, and Benoit pins Jericho. They both lead with championships. They both got one up on each other, and and this leads to Benoit and Angle having a feud basically all throughout 2000, and then Jericho and Benoit having a storyline pretty much all through 2001 until Benoit has to have surgery.
Right.
I mean, it's a shame when the surgery happens because that means that Benoit can't take part in the invasion angle, really. But I mean, they have that great match at Royal Rumble the next year. There's an incredible tag match they have against Benoit against Jericho and Austin.
Austin and Triple H.
Yeah, Austin and Triple H. My bad. And it leads to that great triple threat, which is the one I think that Benoit actually gets injured in with, or at least aggravates his neck in against Austin and Jericho for the championship.
And he had they had that great ladder match at Royal Rumble. I mean, that's one of my favorite ladder matches of all time too. Is the match that Jericho and Benoit had.
Right.
And this is actually going to lead to one of my other matches that I picked. But
one of mine too.
And this was the one that actually ended up replacing. This was when I ranked them. I ranked this one, the one we just talked about, WrestleMania 16. That was the first one I picked. That's the one that I've always loved. That's the first one that came to me. Then there were two others from Nitro. Or from WCW, but then my fourth match, and I'm gonna jump on this because I have a feeling it's one of yours too. But the TLC match from May 24th episode of SmackDown in 2001. It was right after the Chris's won the titles from the two-man power trip on Raw. They were
and then they defended against the Dudleys, the Hardys, and Edge and Christian, right?
And Edge and Christian in a 4 tag team TLC match.
Right.
And this was one of those types of matches that it was out of Benoit's, it was out of his element. And even though he wasn't the star in this, like he was in that triple threat with HBK and Triple H, or the star like he was in the triple threat. Well, I honestly can't say he was the star of that WrestleMania because I thought all three guys were strong. All three guys could have, depending on what your attitude was at the time, all three of those guys could have been the star of that. But
right.
when you got the Chris's coming in as tag team champions, going up against the kings of the tables, the kings of the ladders, and the kings of the chairs. And this is shortly after Chris Benoit's face turn, and the whole reason after that he had those wars with Jericho, and then Jericho and him become friends in a tag team as a way to make Benoit a face. For them to put on this match, and it was Benoit's involvement in this wasn't as huge as you would think. I mean, they came down to the ring. There was shortly after the match got started, Matt Hardy got laid out on a table outside the ring. And Benoit went up to the top rope and was going to do his diving headbutt onto Matt Hardy, who was laying on a table. Well, Matt Hardy moved. Benoit goes through the table and then gets carted off to the back with possible broken ribs. And then, of course, after a little while, he comes back out limping, holding his ribs and everything. He ends up getting back into the ring and gets a concerto for his effort from Edge and Christian right to the ribs. But he ends up being the guy who climbs up and pulls down the title. The match itself was not from Benoit's. I mean, the match itself was amazing. The guys, all of them, took just amazing bumps. Jeff Hardy with his leg drop over the ladder onto the announce table on Bubba Ray. You had Christian, where I thought Christian had died at one point because he. I don't know if you ever noticed that Christian, when Edge gets tipped off a ladder into the ropes, he always crouches himself on the ropes and then rolls onto the floor. Christian doesn't do that. He completely misses the ropes and goes completely over the ropes and straight to the floor. And in this one, he literally landed flat on his side. And it looked like he, had killed himself. It looked like he was dead with the way he landed. Like he was not going to get up again. So, I mean, there was a ton of just ridiculously sick spots. But then to have Benoit come back out injured, sell that injury, and still go against all that and climb up. I thought this match was just amazing.
Yeah, that really is a great TLC match. I had totally forgotten about that match until you mentioned it. You said that was from May 24th of 2001?
Yeah, it was 3 days after they won the belts from the two-man power trip.
Okay, so 4 days after that, on the next Raw, it's actually from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and Chris Jericho opens the show challenging, saying that he wants a match against Steve Austin for the World Championship. Or I suppose he probably had to call the WWE Championship at that time. And this is when Steve Austin and Vince McMahon were, thick as thieves, or when they were together. Because Austin, McMahon helped Austin win the championship from The Rock, and The Rock got Steve Austin in his back pocket as a result. So in this particular match, in this particular show, when Jericho says he wants a title shot. McMahon comes out and says, "Okay, so you want a title shot?" And Jericho says, "Yeah." He goes, "You got your title shot against the Big Show for the Hardcore Championship," which of course frees up Chris Benoit to then be the guy to challenge Steve Austin for the World Championship. And the match ends in a screw job. They do pull the whole Montreal thing, but that also pisses off Steve Austin because he wants to prove that he is that he can beat Chris Benoit one-on-one, fair and square. And so what that sets up is Chris Benoit getting to wrestle for the World Championship, this time not just in his home province, but in his hometown of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, on May 31st. So this is now exactly a week after the match you're talking about, on May 31st, 2001. And this match fucking rocks.
This was a very good match, too.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, this is a match where Benoit gets the cripple crossface on Austin like 6 times. They trade the sharpshooter back and forth. Austin is so close to tapping out or being pinned several times. He's so close to winning several times as well. This is a match where Benoit hits 10. This is like you're saying, the mayor of Suplex City. He hits 10 German suplexes in a row on Austin, and almost gets the pin with that 10th German suplex. He's got Austin trapped in the middle of the ring, ready to get the victory on him. And I'm not sure why you're laughing, but he's about ready to get the victory on Austin. Austin's about to tap out to that crossface, and then McMahon pulls the referee out, punches him, and then or no, he doesn't. I'm sorry. He goes in the ring with a chair. The referee is like fighting him for the chair. I'm sorry, he fights Benoit for the chair. Benoit starts wailing away on McMahon with the chair, and then Austin gets the quick roll up from behind and gets the 3 count to retain his championship. It's just absolutely fantastic match that again made both guys look like world beaters. Well, didn't make both guys look like world beaters, but made Benoit look like a world beater at the same time as keeping the championship on the hot Steve Austin.
Yeah, and that was also just another amazing match. And I watched. Wasn't too long after that. It would have been the 2002 Royal Rumble and then the 2003 Rumble.
Yeah.
I found myself watching those, and I don't really know why, but I was just amazed at the amount of talent that was in the WWF at that time. From the 98 through about 2004, I don't know that there was a scrub in the entire locker room on either one of the brands. It seemed like everybody that came out for the Rumble had star power.
Can I be a dick for just a second?
Sure.
Isn't 2002 the Royal Rumble where Maven dropkicked Undertaker out of it?
Yeah.
There you go. That was a scrub.
He wasn't being billed as one at the time. But even the 2003 Rumble, Maven was in there, but outside of Maven, Chris Nowitzki was the other one that was in there. He was another guy that was on that Tough Enough with him and Josh Matthews and Maven.
Chris Nowitzki was awesome. If he hadn't gotten those concussions, I think he would have been a superstar.
Oh, I think he would have been a future world champion easily. But that match was just the 2003 Rumble especially had just everybody that came to the ring was just is like one star after another. And you look back at these and you're like, oh man, that guy had such a great career. That guy had a great career. That guy had a great career. The only 2 people that I could say in there that maybe weren't, Maven and Chavo. Chavo might have been the only other person in that match where I could have said, eh.
Oh, I was always a big fan of Chavo.
I was too, but he never really reached the heights. I mean, even when he went to TNA for that time, he never really reached the heights that you would have thought he would have. Because he was so talented, he just never got the run that he deserved.
No, he didn't, unfortunately. So, what was your next match? Or should I move on to my next match? Because you actually mentioned one of the event that my next match is at. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I've got 2. Both of mine are from WCW. So. Okay,
so my third one, I guess it would be, or actually my last one chronologically, was the match for the WWF Championship match from Royal Rumble 2003, where Kurt Angle was defending against Chris Benoit. This is probably shortly before the SmackDown match that you watched between the 2 of them. But I thought this was an excellent match. Lots of suplexes, lots of submission. Both guys just wrestling their fucking hearts out. And this is the match where Chris Benoit loses by tap out. I think it's the first time ever that Kurt Angle used that drop down version of the ankle lock. Where he does the ankle lock, and then people keep escaping, so finally he drops down in order to lock them down so they can't crawl to the ropes or roll out of it. And then he drops down. Benoit is trapped. He has nowhere to go. He taps out. Angle leaves. Benoit stands up, and the crowd gives him a standing ovation. Just absolutely a fantastic match, and between two all-time greats.
Yeah, and Angle, I mean, a lot of his career was in TNA, and not a lot of people really watched him there, but he ended up becoming one of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time. There was a time there when he would have probably been considered the best wrestler in the world.
Kurt Angle?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, especially I would say his run from about 2002, his run on SmackDown, and then probably through, I would say, Main Event Mafia in 2011. He was just probably the best wrestler in the world at that time. I mean, there were a couple people like Randy Orton probably could have been there for a little while had he not gotten in that never-ending feud with John Cena. A few other wrestlers, AJ Styles was another one, but it's hard to argue that Angle wasn't one of the best in the world during that time.
No, he definitely was, and I think that history's going to remember him less fondly than it should for a couple of reasons. Number one is that he left WWE in 2006, and he didn't come back until last year, or the year before. And number two is that he just wrestled for too long. He wrestled to the point where it wasn't good for his health. He would turn shades of orange when he's in there, which is not a good sign. He just wasn't. I mean, it's almost like Ric Flair, where he just couldn't find he just couldn't convince himself, I guess, that it wasn't a good idea for him to keep wrestling. It certainly wasn't, and it probably was a worse idea for Angle to keep wrestling than it was for Ric Flair to.
The sad thing about that is he had the perfect retirement angle in TNA. In like 2013, when he went on that retirement tour and retired at the end of Bound for Glory in 2014, that was probably the best way to go out. But he just couldn't do it, to the point where he was still wrestling in 2019. 5 years later, he's still wrestling. I think that if he had left in 2014, that we wouldn't be saying that about him now.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. The other thing I want to say about Angle while we're on the subject in the moment is TNA is that I think that TNA was just so excited to get him that they fucked up their entire business plan.
Yep, that is true.
Because Samoa Joe was on his way to being the undefeated world champion and to having a great run at the top of that card, and the moment they signed Kurt Angle, Angle had to beat Samoa Joe. And that just really, I'm not saying that TNA would have been, beating WWE if that hadn't happened, but I would be fascinated to see how much closer they would have gotten to be in competition with WWE if Samoa Joe had been able to become the big star he really should have been at that point.
Well, yeah, and the stop and start booking with AJ Styles, and it just they made a lot of mistakes that just got worse once Dixie bought it. But that's a whole nother topic for another time. Maybe when we do a Kurt Angle episode.
Yeah, when dicks get involved in things, it's never a good thing. Never
a good thing. Well, my third match, actually, I'm going to save that one for last, simply because it's the worst of them. One of my other matches, and probably my second favorite one out of the bunch, and I jumped down to the the TLC match, but my second favorite one, and this is probably going to surprise you and maybe a lot of other people, but the Owen Hart tribute match from the October 4th, 99 episode of Nitro with Benoit versus Brett. And the reason I liked it is not because of what everyone else thought of it. Everyone else that I have ever talked to has always been, oh, well, it was such a great match because it was such a great tribute to Owen. Well, it was such a great match because it was such a great match. This was one of the few old school Hart, dungeon matches, Hart dungeon matches that had really gone away by this point in wrestling. there were very, very few high spots in this match. In fact, I think there were only 2 throughout the entire match. There was one where Benoit had a dive through the second rope and another one where he had a flying headbutt. But other than that, there was no high spots in this match. It was just perfect move after move after move. Just, the story it told wasn't about, 2 guys hating each other. It wasn't about wrestler A overcoming wrestler B, beating him down. There was really none of those classic storylines. It was just 2 guys, 2 faces in the ring, going out there and putting on a perfect, technically sound wrestling match just to see who was better. To me, it was one of the best matches of all time, and I felt like it was such a great callback to the way wrestling was when it was in Stampede Wrestling and the Heart Dungeon and all that stuff, that it's very hard to not just love it. Really, all I gotta say about it.
And yet I never have.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
I think that you're wrong that a lot of people are going to be surprised by it, because I think that it is one of those really loved matches that are out there.
But
it just has never been my personal cup of tea. That's all.
It's loved for different reasons than I loved it for. I mean, people loved it because it was this tribute to Owen Hart and all the emotion that was in it because of what had happened with Owen and Brett's first match back, and Benoit literally growing up with Owen Hart and wrestling right alongside him and being trained right alongside him in the dungeon. So people were emotionally invested in this. For me, the reason why I loved it so much was because it was such an old school match, not because of the players involved. Well, because I don't think there could have been 2 other people that could have pulled off this match, to be honest with you. But it wasn't the emotion behind what had happened to Owen that was my driving force for loving this, which is what so many people it was. My driving force behind it was the fact that it was it was something that wasn't shown in wrestling anymore, even at that time. Now it's such a far gone conclusion that we'll never see anything like it again. But even in 1999, this style of wrestling was so buried behind high spots that it was so fresh and it was so unique that it just struck a chord with me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, for some reason, it's been one of those matches that I just couldn't get into. I mean, even on the night, I was, when they announced it, I was really looking forward to it, to seeing that match, and then it happened, and I was completely underwhelmed, and I continue to be completely underwhelmed by it. I mean, I totally get what you're saying, and I'm not in any way disputing what you're saying about it. I mean, it obviously is a great technically sound match. It's just not one that I've ever been able to get to enjoy.
You and I have talked about this on a number of occasions, and especially on the show. It's like there's matches that you absolutely love that I hate. There's matches that you won't even watch because of the players, and same for me. There's matches that you fall in love with, you think are instant classics, that I'm like, it's just everybody's got a different cup of tea, and that's what's so great about wrestling is you can sit and have these debates with people, and this match was great, here's why, and someone can turn around and say, yeah, but I didn't like it, and here's why, and you can actually have these debates. It's not uniformly known that everybody's going to love exactly the same style of wrestling or exactly the same match and the exact, like not everybody's going to love Chris Benoit, not everybody's going to love Bret Hart. We do, but not everybody. Benoit, I mean, even Bischoff said it, that Benoit just wasn't his cup of tea. He didn't like that style of wrestling. Not Benoit, I'm sorry. Bret Hart wasn't his cup of tea. He loved Benoit, but he wasn't a big fan of Bret Hart because Bret Hart just didn't have the style of matches that he liked watching.
Yeah, he wasn't a fan of Raven at all either.
No, he really wasn't.
But you had mentioned something earlier that I think is even more interesting than debating about debating matches that you like versus matches that you don't like, and that is when you like a match for different reasons than somebody does. To me, that's even a more interesting topic than, hey, I like this match, hey, I didn't like this match. Yeah. I mean, there's people that see matches totally in different ways and will enjoy a match for different reasons than what you enjoy it for.
And this one's a perfect example of that. My reason for loving this is so different than what everybody else's reasons are. Everybody else that I've ever heard talk about it talks about the emotions they felt and seeing these two guys out there putting their hearts out there. And to me, that's not what drew me in. That's not what I loved about it. What I loved about it was the difference, how much different it was, how technically sound it was, it was such a different match at the time that for me, that's what got to me, not necessarily the emotion.
Right. And it's just the same way that I'm trying to think. I mean, there's trying to think of a good example. I don't know. I can't think. Well, let's for an example, WrestleMania 30, the opening match. I mean, I'm sure most people on there, love that opening match because of the storyline involved. But I can certainly see people loving that match also because of the technical story that's being told between two really real masters of the craft. You talked earlier about how Triple H in 2005, 2004 was such an egomaniac and all that kind of stuff. But in 2014, he was doing everything he could to get people over.
Yeah, and he was such a different guy by, I want to say, his last match against The Undertaker in 2010? By that point, he was such a different wrestler than he was in 2004, 2005 that it was almost not even watching the same guy. He was less putting himself over, more putting over whoever he was in the ring against.
Right, and I know this isn't a Triple H show, but I do remember that there was when I used to write columns on the LOP forums, an article came out shortly after Randy Orton had won the world title for the first time from Chris Benoit at SummerSlam 2004, and it was detailing how Triple H was going to win the championship back from Orton at the next pay-per-view, and how and that kind of thing, and I posted an immediate column when I saw that, and said what bullshit it was, that that it made no sense for business, that they just put the title on Orton, and it turned out to be absolutely true. So, I think that kind of is an example of where Triple H's headspace was at that time versus where it was in 2014.
Right.
My fourth match was also in WCW, and what this one was at the time. This was shortly before the exodus of the Radicals to WWE. And at the time, there was an incredible article by Mark Madden, who I know is a hated name in pro wrestling fan circles, but he wrote an outstanding article on the WCW website where he said, because Benoit was on such a roll, he said that it would be impossible to keep the world title off of him, which ended up being true. He said Benoit is Godzilla in Tokyo. He's the Guns of the Navarone. In a word, he's unstoppable. And in this particular case, it was basically like a couple of weeks before the match that I'm talking about at Starrcade '99. What happened at Starrcade '99 is Benoit was supposed to face Scott Hall for the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship. Hall didn't make it. I'm not sure if he was injured or if this was another one of his drug problems or what the deal was, but Hall was not able to make the show. And so Benoit was awarded the championship at the very beginning of it. And Benoit said, I don't want to win the title that way. Find me an opponent. And so in the semi-main, Benoit comes out there with the United States title hanging above his head, above the ring, and there's a ladder set up, and Benoit still doesn't know who his opponent is. Excuse me. And so he comes out there, and then we see Jeff Jarrett come out, who had already had a match, who had already interfered in the powerbomb match between Kevin Nash and Sid Vicious. And so here he is pulling triple duty, really, challenging Chris Benoit for the United States Heavyweight Championship. And they ended up having one of the greatest ladder matches I've ever seen. It was before its time. There were spots in there you didn't see at that time, including a drop kick from the top rope that knocked the ladder over and knocked Jarrett off of it, including a superplex from the top of the ladder,
And then Benoit was about to climb to the top of the ladder. It looked like he was going to pull the belt down, and instead he did a move that I'm sure contributed towards what happened at the end of his life. But he did a headbutt from the top of that ladder. Jarrett couldn't move, and then Benoit left with the championship he had won earlier in the night. So I mean, it was just a fantastic, one night story for Benoit, but also a fantastic championship match for the with the ladder involved.
I remember
It wasn't a match where the ladder. It wasn't the stunt brawl type of ladder match. It was a wrestling match that happened to involve a ladder.
Right, and that's what I was just gonna say. Is I remember that match being just an incredible wrestling match, a lot more like the was it WrestleMania 10 when Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon had the first ever ladder match. That was a lot like this one, where it was just a wrestling match that just happened.
Well, it's advertised as the first ever ladder match, but the first ever actual ladder match was between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels.
I did not know that. Anyway, that match that with Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels was a lot like this one, where it was a wrestling match that just happened to have a ladder there.
Yep.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. It was such a great match that the two put on that wasn't so much revolved around the ladder, but more so the ladder was just a prop that just happened to be there, and it was used occasionally.
Exactly.
Instead of like now, where the ladder's a weapon, the ladder's another damn wrestler in the ring. My last match, or the last match I'm doing, actually took place 1 month after that. The WCW Sold Out pay-per-view in 2000. And this was not a great match by any standards. If I had to rate it, I would say average at best, maybe a little bit above average, maybe like a 2.75 on the star ratings. It was between Sid Vicious and Chris Benoit for the WCW World Title. It was odd for a lot of reasons. The two really did mesh well together. They really did put on a good match for what it was, but there was so much goofiness out of Sid, especially when he was coming down to the ring. He wasn't the master and ruler of the worlds that he's always been. He was some goofy face that was making jokes and laughing and high-fiving people all the way down to the ring. And there was the ending. The ending was confusing at best, with Sid hitting a choke slam, and then the pinfall was waved off after a 2 count because the ref noticed Benoit's foot was under the rope. Benoit stands up, immediately puts Sid in a cripple crossface, and Sid taps. However, Sid's foot is also under the ropes. And, I mean, the reasoning behind that was a booking decision that they made because they thought that was going to be Benoit's last match. They put the title on him, hoping that would change it, but they had to have an out in case he didn't come back, which he didn't. So Sid had his foot under the rope. But the part that got to me was not only did we notice it on TV, but Tony Schiavone noticed it when he was going through the replay, and he goes, "Oh, I see his foot under the rope." He goes, "That happened after he tapped. He tapped first." And it was such a goofy, not very well done ending that it actually made WCW endings look good, which is hard to say because I don't think WCW ever had a good ending of a match. But the reason why this match it makes my list and why it meant so much to me is because this was the moment that I had been waiting for since the first day I saw him as a member of the Four Horsemen teaming up with Brian Pillman in 1995. This was the Benoit's crowning moment where he was finally awarded the World Championship. He was finally the top dog in the company where he should have been 4 years prior. So this one just it makes my list and will always make my list for that moment, for that reasoning alone.
That makes sense to me. If we ever do a Chris Jericho one, I might have to choose the match where he beat The Rock for the WCW Championship just because of this, for the same reason. Because I felt like Jericho never really got a fair shake in WCW as a heavyweight. I mean, he was booked as a cruiserweight. He started what should have been a great feud against Bill Goldberg. He was a great TV champion there, but then that's basically as far as they were ever willing to push him. And a guy that really should have been, and I realized WWE was actually his first love, but I mean for a guy that really should have been the top guy on the card in a lot of ways in WCW to never get a shot because of the NWO angle and all that other kind of stuff, it was kind of a nice thing for me as a Jericho fan to see him win the WCW World Title, even though it really wasn't in WCW anymore.
Yeah, and that night I would count those both those matches as just one big match because Benoit never left the ring. He had that match against The Rock, and people when they talk about he beat The Rock and Stone Cold at the same night, they don't talk about the fact that he beat The Rock and Stone Cold in what was basically a gauntlet match.
Yeah, he beat him back to back. Yeah.
Because he just got done putting on an epic match, a great match with The Rock, and Stone Cold's music hits. He doesn't even get a breather, nothing. It's just right into the match with Stone Cold, and then he beat Austin too. So I mean, to me, that's just one big match. That's not even two separate matches.
Yeah, but I think what you've forgotten in saying that is that he actually was the WCW champion. He actually won the WCW title a month before that.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he won it like on a. I want to say he won it at like Survivor Series from The Rock. And then The Rock won it back on Raw. So. Yeah,
that's right. I do remember that now. I do remember that now. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. That is something that people forget is that he didn't just beat him in the same night. He beat him in back-to-back matches.
Yeah, it was basically a gauntlet match, is what it was. It was a gauntlet match against two heavyweight champions.
Yeah.
And two of the best in the history of wrestling.
Well, against probably the two biggest stars in the history of WWE.
The history of wrestling. I would go that far. I mean, I would put them right up there with Hogan and Flair as the biggest stars in history.
Well, Flair does not deserve to be in that conversation. He doesn't. He didn't draw the money that Rock, Hogan, or Austin did.
Well, no, because he didn't have the machine behind him either.
Right.
He did the majority of his on his own in the NWA and the territories.
That's true. I'm just saying if you want to, depending on how you define it, he just didn't draw the way those guys did to be in that conversation with them.
And it's just circumstantial. It's just because of where he was located.
Well, yes and no, but he also is the one that chose to leave WWE because he wanted to go back to WCW.
That is true. Could you imagine
if he had stayed?
Had he stayed in WWE, would we have ever had Bret Hart?
That's an excellent question.
Or even Shawn Michaels for that matter, because Shawn was still just an Intercontinental title holder at that time.
Yeah, I don't know how that timing worked out because he left, he lost that match. I want to say it was the Raw right before Royal Rumble 2003. I'm sorry, 1993 that was his loser leaves town match. So, but I don't know how far in front of that he had planned to leave when they and if that's why they took the title off of him and put it on Brett.
Well, I know they and didn't he win the IC title from Hart or from Flair too? I know he won it from Hennig.
Flair wasn't Intercontinental champion until he was part of Evolution.
Oh, okay. See, it's what happens when stuff happens 30 years ago. It's hard to remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. Do you have any more on Chris?
I don't. I mean, I think we did a good job of talking about what we enjoyed about him, about his his career and all that kind of jazz. But yeah, I mean, this was who Chris Benoit was, I guess.
Right. Well, housekeeping stuff then. I guess if you're listening to this, thank you for being a subscriber to Patreon. We've got good things coming in the future. In fact, I'm not sure who we're going to go with after this. I'm kind of leaning towards wanting to maybe cover Eddie Guerrero, but I guess we'll see where we go next. In the future, after we get a few of these under our belts and get, we want to get the Patreon users involved to let us know who they want to hear us discuss. And that's something that'll be coming in the future. Follow us on Twitter, me at RegiCoop, Shane at ZanmanLOP. Use hashtag Kingdom of Honor. That gets to both of us and much easier to find than trying to spell my handle. Also on Facebook at Kingdom of Honor. Just search Kingdom of Honor. It's a skull wearing a crown in front of a in front of a ring. And if you want to send us personal messages, I set up a Gmail account, kingdomofhonor123@gmail.com. You can send us personal messages, and if they're good stories, we'll read them live on the air.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you guys, and yeah, I mean, definitely if you have a good story, if you have any good anecdotes, if you just want to ask us an awesome question, we'll be happy to answer on the air for you guys.
Yeah, or if you have a topic you want us to cover that we're not covering, a promotion or anything that you want to hear us talk about, let us know.
And yeah, I think we hadn't talked about it before. That's what we can do next. But I think Eddie Guerrero's a good choice. You know, it flows nicely from Benoit, and you know, I mean, he's certainly one of the greatest of all time. So
He's Latino heat.
he is Latino heat.
This is going to be a tough one though, because I can already think of at least a dozen matches here too that I would take with me. I'll have to narrow them down over the next couple of weeks.
Half dozen, huh?
Probably more than that, to be honest with you. Right off the top of my head, I've got he had his first match as a member of the Radicals when he got injured against the New Age Outlaws. He had his when him and Chavo won the title belts for the first time. The match he had against anything he did against Rey Mysterio or Dean Malenko in WCW. Any of those matches.
Well, don't sleep on his match against Rey Mysterio at SummerSlam for that ladder match either. That was a great match too.
That was a great match too. The one over Dominic.
Right.
Yeah.
The angle was kind of laughable, but I mean, yeah, the match was awesome. And
the performances that they put on were, and of course his title victory over Brock.
And not to mention his title loss to
JBL.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 7-8 matches right there, just off the top of our heads.
Well, so good thing we have a couple of weeks to think about it, huh?
A couple weeks to think about it and watch them.
Very true.
All right. Well, I guess this is us saying goodbye. Thanks for listening to our Wrecked with Wrestlers.
Yes. And don't be a maroon. Just keep listening.
Don't be a maroon. Goodbye.
Adios.